Hello and welcome back to the North American SMITE Challenger Circuit. We are done with our first set of the day, moving in to set number 2, which should be an interesting one because it's the undefeated Eldritch Hounds. And it's not just undefeated in this phase, this is undefeated for the entire season of regular play. And we'll have to see if the Athenian Sages can be the first team to topple them. Before we can get to the game though, I introduce myself and my partner over here. I'm J-Mac. I got Gormizer joining me on the desk to see if we can finally see if history gets made so far. Oh yeah, by the way, that's your first time on
I've not been over here since the glass disappeared. It's really weird, dude.
I gotta imagine it's such a jarring feeling.
There's nothing to.
There's no place to rest.
I usually I sit with my hands down.
Do it. Charlie doesn't hit it. Did it to
the
him.
Totally close.
Yeah. Just yep.
I hate that. I hate this too.
That's what Charlie does sometimes too. Is he'll all the way arms out, just crazy.
I feel very presenty.
You gotta look a little presenty.
If I'm up at a podium and I'm telling you, hey man, this is a new Apple product. That's something people present. Get us on stage. I'm off it, man. There's no glass. I don't know what to do.
You're all good. You're all good, Gormizer. Like I said, we are going to take a look now at the schedule for our North American sets today. Remember, all day today is going to be North American SCC. We had all of Europe yesterday, finished those, and now we're finishing week 4 for NA today. Yomi Tanuki take a 2-0 over the Anansi Weavers for our first set of the day. We'll move in to the Eldritch Hounds and Athenian Sages, and then we'll round out the day with the Callan Vordens and the Shibalba Storm. As I said, though, the Eldritch Hounds are undefeated this phase, and so far undefeated this entire season. 5-0 in Phase 1, 5-0 in Phase 2, currently 3-0 at the moment here. We'll see if the Athenian Sages can be the first team to topple the North American powerhouse squad of the Eldritch Hounds. And it's going to take quite a bit to do so. The Eldritch Hounds, when these guys really bunker down, when these guys really put their mind to the grind, or really get to the grindstone and whatnot, these guys are insane. There's a reason that these guys have gone undefeated. There's a reason why these guys constantly are making waves over in places like Masters. They were able to defeat an SPL team at one point there. The Eldritch Hounds are a solid team, and it does take a lot to get a fully coordinated squad to actually truly beat these guys out. And when you look at some of the names on the Eldritch Hounds, well, first off, they just brought a new solo laner in this year, Ducky, now on the squad here. You never heard of Ducky?
Nope.
Well, let me tell you the tale of the man of someone took Duck. He's pretty good at the game. He also used to play SPL for a little while.
Oh, really?
It's pretty good, I would say.
Sounds pretty good. Yeah, no, Ducky has a incredibly accomplished solo laner. I would argue it's really interesting because if you look at Ducky's competitive career, especially in the SPL, it's not a lot of wins. It's actually real low down there. But it comes with that caveat of you almost always, for years and years and years, we're getting picked up on these teams. I think has definitely been able to find a home here. First off, also just a really, really incredibly nice person as well.
Oh yeah.
But it's been a pleasure to be able to watch him again down in the SEC. The Hounds as a whole have been an interesting enigma throughout this year. Although this phase, I think, have gotten a lot more solid, right? And just looking at it, because you had mentioned undefeated for the year, that is in sets, not in games, right? They're 33-14 total for the year, 70% win rate. They do really well. They do have a tendency to mess around in game 2s, and they haven't been doing that as much recently. I mean, even last week it was a 2-0 over the Storm. Things like that, I think that are, in my mind, that's honestly the way to try and shape up by the end of the year, right? Don't be throwing unnecessary games. Don't be picking things just because you think it's funny. Really, really lock down. And I think having Ducky on this team to kind of give that leadership. I mean, you've got, a bunch of guys that are very competitive, very, very talented. Oath, Crimson, Dude Man Bro, Quig. A lot of them that have performed incredibly well down the hall from us, right? On LAN. But having someone who has a lot of SPL experience kind of guiding them to the right place, in my mind, just is the right thing for them.
And then up against them, the Athenian Sages roster for them. Dishonored, Shortfuse, Jengaru, Privative, and Renjaru. A very powerful squad in the Sages, and one that's been doing a lot of growing ever since Phase number 1. I mean, you look back to Phase 1 Sages, they're kind of struggling to find their wins out there. They're getting maybe one game here and there up against some teams. You get into Phase number 2 with the Sages, still currently on the rise, not quite all the way up there yet, hitting kind of more so that middle of the pack. And now Athenian Sages currently sitting the number 3 seed in North America with a really strong chance to maybe be able to take down the Eldritch Hounds. I've really been keeping my eyes in that dual lane specifically. Privet and Renjaru have really been stepping up for themselves on this squad.
Yeah, this is a team that, looking at them From, like you said, from phase 1 to now, first off, a lot of different phases that
Oh, yeah.
you're going to notice from phase 1 to now. The team has gone through constant shifts, but it has made a very big difference. You're talking about a team that in phase 1 is struggling to find a single win, and now you're talking about a team that is, like you said, been very, very consistent. A lot more of a show to put on from them, and I think it has been just better to watch them go through this growth. I think Privative has been, in a way, a really good leader, also just a really good support player. Again, it's really fun to watch because you get a lot of different styles. I mean, look, the Athena, I'm trying to think of other people playing the Athena competitively right now, and it is not a lot on that list. I think that they have, again, a couple of gods that fit them really well that nobody else is playing, and I like that they keep going to that. And so I want to see that a little more often from them. I think that they're going to have a pretty decent chance this one to at least hold the Hounds back.
Yeah, and I think that's always the important thing, especially when you're taking on a team as seasoned as the Hounds are, whenever you're taking on a team as talented as them, is you don't necessarily want to try and play their game, or you don't want to try and beat their game. You want to try and play to your play style, what suits really well for you. So we'll see if the Sages can do that here in game number 1 as we hop into the picks and bans to see what does end up getting picked up for both of these squads out there. Eldritch Hounds, one of the answers that used to be up against this team in the past, especially when we looked over at some of the Masters events, was we just ban Oath out. We're usually pretty solid, but Oath has been, over the course of this year, slowly expanding that god pool. He went from going towards the more hyper carry, auto attack style junglers, now has picked up Thor into his roster, has picked up a couple more, not necessarily non-hyper carries, but definitely gods that don't rely on him to be the sole carry for his team. Everybody else has been able to kind of pick up around there. Neith, Freya, and Athena banned away by the Hounds, so making sure to take that one away from Primitive. And on the opposite side, Thor banned away from Oath, and then a Muzen Cobb and Yamoja to round those out.
So I was really excited coming into this because I was like, okay, cool, I've got some really fun numbers that I can throw out for the Sages where about their win rate with their specific niche gods. They're 4 for 4 on Freya in terms of win, 100% win rate with her. Same high, 2 and 2. With Athena, so they've won 100% win rate there. And then the same thing with a Nike. And I was like, man, if they can line up the stars and get this draft, it's going to look really good for them. And then 2/3 of that gets banned away immediately, which just goes to show to me that the Hounds have been doing their homework, right? Making sure that they know what kind of picks that they're going for on the other side, what kind of things that they need to deal with. The Nike does still have a 100% win rate for this team, so that is something that I think maybe can be slightly concerning for the Hounds. Also hasn't really been in meta for a while, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have the big shielding meta, nice big slow on that, a lot of kind of capabilities to start a fight. But she's been gone for a long time. So that question of, okay, so how are you handling this lane? How are you handling this matchup? You're Hades. I don't think you're going to be stressing too much about it. You're still going to do a lot late game as long as you go for the right build. But I think that's definitely going to be a point of contention.
Top 3 for both of the teams. Hades, Cupid, Ymir for the Eldritch Hounds. Sages grab Cernunnos, Nike, and Ganesh. And I'm just looking at the Eldritch Hounds roster right now, Gore, with just those top 3. Not even the third one there. I can just look at the top 2. Because one of the things about Hades, most people just jump or dash out of his ultimate. You're usually pretty good. Throw a Cupid in there, you kind of cut that one off, and you're forcing multiple relics or ultimates to be able to try and get away from here. So it feels very dangerous, kind of for at least the Cernunnos and the Ganesh, because they don't have any inherent CC immunity to deal with it. And as we jump into the second wave of the bans, Nemesis, Susano, Pele, and the Morgan all taken away here. The Morgan, one of the few mages that's still being kind of consistently played up in the mid lane. Outside of that, we've been seeing majority kind of hunters kind of dominating that role. Even some assassins kind of been popping in there as well.
I think that's something, again, we were talking about it, I think, last week in the SPL. Shinto, I believe, had tweeted it, but essentially, if you're not playing Vulcan, you're playing the Morgan. If you're not playing either of those, you're not playing a mage, or at least you shouldn't be, right? Your AMCs have been taking that role, your sets, assassins, hunters, literally anybody else has been stepping into it. It has been very different, though. You get that in the very top and most of the SPL. The minute you shimmy down to the SCC, it's mages galore, right? All of a sudden, you're seeing people that, honestly, I like Agni. Agni's not necessarily someone that comes to the top of my mind when I'm thinking of the mid mage tab as of right now. But I don't think it's going to do poorly. I think he still brings a lot to the team. It just does change the style from what we see in the SPL. I think right now it's a very oppressive kind of style of play. When you have these mages there, it slows that down a little bit and kind of puts more reliance on the jungler to make things happen.
Well, we'll see if the Eldritch Hounds can find themselves a continued streak, or can the Athenian Sages start off hot in this set as we jump into game number 1 between the Eldritch Hounds and the Athenian Sages. And immediately, Oath in danger. Luckily for him, didn't grab anything just yet. Had to get the jump early on, though. Definitely not the start that you want, ideally, for the Hunbats, but it at least keeps his life.
Yeah, that's one of those moments, and this is part of why you'll see, especially depending on where you stand in the jungle, people will discuss pretty heavily what are you leveling, when do you level, maybe more than anything. If you're just hanging out at your speed buff, you can just go ahead and throw that overhand smash. Odds that they're going to walk that deep into your jungle and get away with it, pretty low. But when you're, a support player, we've seen a lot of roaming around, or in this case, a jungler that's maybe hanging out a little too far forward. If you waste that level, if you put it anywhere, that's a death, right? If Oath had already spent that into overhand smash, yeah, you might get some damage back, but you're just going to die there. So really, small thing, but a good play for Oath, just to make sure he doesn't have it. That being said, I know for a fact I'm one of the people that does not take that advice. I immediately level whatever ability I want the minute I am in the fountain, and then walk away. And so what I'm saying is I would have died there 100% of the time because I'm a fool. Oath, not a fool, doesn't die.
Wise words from Gormizer. If you don't be a fool, you just won't die.
Yeah, if you're just smart, then you win sometimes.
And one thing to note there, however, is that Quig did manage to steal the purple buff away from Priv, who held on to his hog, and even threw the Invader's Curse.
Now, J-Mac, I am going to say, that's kind of the point of the hog, by the way.
Yeah.
Is that if you think you're going to lose it, you hog the buff so you don't lose it. Instead, not only stolen away, but there's no hog on the other side. Not that it even would have mattered, but you could have either gone for another invade, or you just know for a fact you're going to guarantee it better than a level 1 support. But now, not only have you given that up, but it's going to be pressure because we saw the Interceptor just go over there. You've already got a Cupid Ymir. That's a nasty lane versus a Kernanos and Ganesh. You're giving up a ton of pressure from the get-go by not using an item that you bought for the purpose of buying that item. The whole reason you get it is to deter the steal. If there's going to be a steal, you'd use it to secure. And maybe, yes, it's still going to exist for the second wave, but unless they're invading it, which at this point, because of the pressure that you've given them, they should be.
Wait, Meditation by Crimson still doesn't give him enough HP, but Meditation mid lane, Crimson falls down, first blood, goes to the Athenian Sages, and now maybe an invade over here on the blue buff. Short Fuse has shown up, but the damage from Ducky enough to secure that blue. Sacred Monkey Toss, gotta be a teleport in from Oath, but with Short Fuse so far out, and now Quig in danger, maybe another kill for the Yu Huang mid. Jangaru dives in, gets the knockback, needs a little bit more damage, one more ability, one more auto, maybe. Primitive doesn't find it, the root's there, and Renjaru grabs it.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you're throwing out so many wide abilities. Somebody's got to find him, right? Luckily, it's the giant circle of brambles that is able to pick it up. Again, I think that there's a lot of... Remember that thing I was saying? This is how I'd like to frame it. That thing I was saying about how sometimes the Hounds just make weird choices, and it does weird things for their games. That's what an Agni mid with Meditation screams to me. Yes, admittedly, when you're thinking about this matchup, specifically with with the Ratatosker, the beads maybe aren't as necessary. Although there's a root on the other side, he's still got a stun, he's got a good knock-up, there's a root that comes down from the Ganesh. It's not as big as if you were against the Hunbats, right? If you're on the other side of this matchup, suddenly you want those beads pretty heavily. And so I can see getting away with it, because your dash is pretty good, lots of distance on it. It's still a very interesting choice. And you get punished for it immediately. I think that's a good call from the Sages to just jump on that, lock it down. And honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing them do it again. I mean, at this point, if you know that not only is Med down, but there's no beads, up until level 12, Short Fuse should just bully the Agni as best as possible. You've got a dash that can keep up. Your knock-up is absolutely insane. If you knock up into stun with a Yu Huang behind you, that should be enough damage to kill Crimson over and over again. Late game, I mean, at that point, I'm assuming second relic is going to be Agni. You can still see, I mean, this is only level 5, but that damage is not necessarily going to change. The meteors are still going to be good. Flame Wave, in my mind, is still a fantastic ability. Plus, you've got a ton of setup for your team, lots of stuns, capability like that. And so I think that as this transitions into late game, it's going to get bullied less. And unless Short Fuse starts acting pretty heavily, it might not get punished at all.
You do see the Soul Lane clear up, and probably one of the more unfortunate matchups for a Nike is to go into a Hades where as soon as Red gets channeled, here's a silence. Now all of your wave clears essentially gone. It's never a fun feeling in that lane. Junglers meet up. Jangaru is here, waits for the jump, finds the root, finds the fire, and finds his second kill of the game. The Yu Huang pick up from Jangaru, paying off early for the Athenian Sages. Not only a first blood, but a second one and an assist from earlier on.
And really good rotations, right? I mean, that's what's really getting me. Most of the time, like, you'll see these mid laners, and the rotations have been coming out heavily from the assassins that are in mid, things like that. It makes sense for them to be able to get across the map fast. But, you know, you've got Yu Huang. He's not really running the quickest of all people. And admittedly, that one's way closer to the jungle than the fight over on left. But you're there, right? Jangaru's present for every single one of these kills so far, finding one on his own, but helping with one in left, finding one there with a little bit of assistance. I like the presence that Jangaru is exerting on the map already, and just kind of showcasing that he's got that safety, right? Not only does he have the beads, but he has the immunity in the kit. Oath can't really get too aggressive on him because Crimson's fallen a little bit behind here, and while it's not showing an experience, you can see it in the build, already stacking on one side versus still waiting to get to the tier 3 on the other. So the Sages, I mean, this is a beautiful start for him.
It's a great way to maybe try and find a game, especially up against the Eldritch Hounds. Dash in by Ducky just to get back, and the fact that he's not silencing every single, I guess he just used it prior, so that kind of gave Dishonored free reign in that map, on that lane. Now some damage onto Dude Man Bro. Renjar, though, only level 6, where Dude Man's sitting level 7. His partner Quig has left this lane for Dude Man to do his own thing over here, starting up the Devourer's Gauntlets on the Cupid. Means he'll have some decent sustain to kind of box up against Renjaru. And it has been nice kind of seeing, you know, the change up in the builds once, you know, the Devourer's Gauntlet kind of came back into the meta. We're starting to see at least some differences in the Hunter builds. We're no longer seeing kind of the cookie cutter build that we were seeing just a few weeks back.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch, like you said, the deviation of itemization. Sometimes we're getting crit, sometimes we're getting pure tank shredder, sometimes we're getting the, you know, admittedly not as much anymore because those hunters have fallen out like the Ulers, but not the ability-based ones that we used to see. But it is back to the Devo's Gauntlets. Again, having that extra little pin that you have when it fully evolves is just really nice, as it turns out, for an item that you get super early on. The lifesteal's really good. And it always feels this way, and I think, you know, we've heard it from other hunters in the Pro League. Barra is one that comes to my mind immediately, because he really likes Devo's Gauntlets, period. And it's just that they're a really good item. It's just sometimes, like, they make small changes to it, and it's those small changes that will either make it slightly better than going for a Transcendence or slightly worse than going for a Transcendence. And it's always just those little deviations. We still have seen quite a few Transcendences.
Transcendi?
Transcendi? Whatever you want to call them. We've definitely seen still quite a few of them, depending on the hunter, the player, honestly, because sometimes it comes down to preference. But I do like seeing the return of Devourer's Gauntlets. It makes things always interesting to me watching a hunter, especially when you know they have that turnaround potential because of the lifesteal, and how these builds are going to shake out like as time goes on. 1v1s between Dude Man Bro and Renjaru are going to be impactful. Renjaru having some built-in lifesteal, Cupid having just the hearts, right? So there's like fun healing that can happen. The left side lane, if left alone and it's just that 1v1 vacuum, can actually just be a really entertaining like fight.
Ducky level 10 has his Book of Thought and a Tainted Steel start immediately after to deal with. Not a whole lot of healing on the opposite side. I mean, there's a Mail of Renewal that's going to pop in that could come up for Dishonored. Lifesteal, obviously, for Renjaru, and then any kind of maybe extra healing that does get picked up along the way. But so far, it's been pretty quiet on the right side of the map. All the action has been over towards the middle, has been over towards this left lane as well. Trying to put some pressure onto Dude Man Bro at the moment are the Athenian Sages. Privative will walk forward. Silence on the Dude Man Bro, canceled into the ultimate, a root immediately, and then a dash out. Darmic Pillars does get some decent damage and a dunk in, but that Fields of Love is gonna stop Short Fuse in his tracks. One more tower shot to tank up, and the Athenian Sages will find their pick and find their way out.
Yeah, good amount of shielding. That really helps out Short Fuse and Privative there, right? Keep both of them sustained. That tower is like, admittedly, like maybe 2 minutes late. If that gank happens a little earlier, that tower is going to clean up those kills for you. Unfortunate for Dude Man Bro. Doesn't quite have the damage online. If I am watching or looking at this right, on that back gets a full Executioner. And I'm thinking that if he had literally any of that going into that fight, probably is able to get at least one of those kills, maybe another. But that's what I wanted to see out of the Sages. Admittedly, I thought it was going to be in mid, but I don't really care where they throw it, as long as there's play from the Ratatosker and they keep this lead going for themselves. Because it's one thing to get a couple early game kills, especially a First Blood. You got to do something with it, right? And that we've been talking a lot about that. Me and Mifflin specifically, I feel like, have been going on a lot more about that in the last couple of weeks. But the problem really, especially in a moment like this, you look up, it's 4-0. I can't count the amount of times that we've seen a 4-0 and then seen the gold being exactly even anyway. And it's like, okay, you need to be able to do something on the map when you get those kills. You just killed Renjaru. That should open up a Gold Fury.
Well, Gold Fury to the left, but Pyromancer on the right has been taken now by the Hounds. Can Dude Man Bro stop this Gold Fury from going down? No Fields of Love just yet. There's a Heart Bomb on a Privative, and this could be a good turnaround kill. The Sages do get the Gold Fury, but Dude Man Bro is waiting for the opportunity to get that ultimate back online. Ult out. Immediate Wild Hunt used by Renjaru. The beads burn through, and everybody on the stage is able to make it out. It's a Pyromancer for Gold Fury trade. That one will at least go in favor of the Athenian Sages, who were able to get that Gold Fury.
Yeah, it's like one of those things very slightly in their favor. It was recently changed. The base amount of gold and experience that you get for a Pyromancer, the base amount of gold and experience you get for a Gold Fury, is made a little more egregious to be in favor of the Gold Fury each time. But it also comes with the like caveat that early on, it's not a big enough difference. Like a 25-minute Gold Fury versus a 25-minute Pyromancer. Pyromancer is important because it's next to the Fire Giant. That's kind of all you're getting it for. But when you're looking at the Gold Furies those late, it's a lot that is going to be worthwhile. As the time goes on, it accrues more, builds up what it's going to give out for you. But still, feels like slightly in favor of the Sages. I think they're a shade ahead of where they were before, or maybe actually even a shade worse off than they were before because of the farming that the Hounds have been able to put out. I think that's just really good timing from Dude Man Bro. Almost enough to be able to get the steal, but really solid ult timing, which was like really weird. Like seeing him transform right as the Fields of Love get shot out. And so he was just able to get the ult out just before Renjaru gets the transformation, forces them to retreat as opposed to giving an opening back to the Sages to turn and fight him. And small little plays like that sometimes are all that keeps you alive, but keeps it from being a 5-0 lead for the Sages and maybe turning that small kill into something more.
Well, maybe it actually comes up a little bit net positive for the Eldritch Hounds because they did get a tier 1 tower right after
that'll
that
usually
Gold Fury
push
went
it
down.
over.
So Pyromancer and a tier 1 for the Gold Fury. And even I'd say, you know, a couple sets of beads out there because that Fields of Love did get Jengaru and Renjaru's builds, or beads away from them. So maybe it does come up just net positive in that regard, at least for the Hounds. But
you know what?
What's up?
I want to get a Smite-themed scale, right? Like two balancing things.
Uh-huh.
And then a bunch of little Smite-themed figurines that represent like Gold Furies, tower, tier 1 towers, tier 2 towers. And then when we start talking about trades, we can have a visual representation of which one is more worthwhile.
We set up a picture-in-picture down in the little corner of the scale. This is us putting the little figures on there.
Say, oh, well, you're like, okay, Gold Fury is more worthwhile than Pyromancer, but then you add that tier 1, and suddenly the scales shift. I think that'd be fun. It's literally just a small visual gag, and honestly, I think that after the first time using it, it would be super frustrating.
On the tree. And down to the ground, Crimson.
Oh my god!
Gets evaporated by Short Fuse and by Priv. The Darmic Pillar's just there to guarantee that he goes down. And that's 5 kills now for the Sages. About a 1,200 gold lead. Maybe can get a little bit more here with this tier 1 tower. Expand that one. Get them closer to that 2K mark. Blinging by Fear No Evil onto 2. Short Fuse will beads and dash away. But Tier 1 tower is gone, the damage has been done, and the Athenian Sages push their lead a little further.
Look, man, this is fantastic from the Sages. I think this is one of the best starts that I've personally gotten to see them have. And being able to do so against the Hounds has been impressive. Again, this phase, things have shifted for them, right? The Hounds have been finding their 2-0s a lot more consistently. They've only dropped one game so far versus the 6 that they've been able to win. And so I think that being able to kick off like this is amazing. The downside is that you get that pick, you start things off, and the only thing you're able to get is a Tier 1. I still think we're in the area of the game where a Tier 1 and that global gold is important for you. But man, would it have been nice if somebody had been able to stop the Pyromancer a little bit earlier on, or if that was able to kind of culminate in a Tier 1 plus an objective. And so it's good timing on the Hounds more than anything that the only thing they lose is a Tier 1, and that it doesn't result in anything more. Because that's how the Sages are going to be able to run away with this game, is if they can take that kind of play, get a single pick, maybe 2, and just ramp it into the jungle. Pyromancer's going to be coming up soon. Not too long after that, 5 seconds after that, the Gold Fury will be back. And so those are where my mind is at for the Sages right now. I think if you can get both of these neutral objectives, that's going to be the thing that solidifies this lead to feel a lot more like a full lead and not just a little bit of gold in your team's favor.
Well, not a single kill yet for the Eldritch Hounds. They have been able to maintain, at least only going down, not even 1,500 gold, I think is probably the highest spike that we've seen so far. Maybe a pick onto Ducky could get things kicked off, at least keep things going on the right-hand side of the map. Finally, we're seeing a little bit of action over this way. First kill for Dishonored.
No
and
way.
Immediately into a Fire Giant.
I love
The Hounds
this.
are a little slow to get there, but the Fire Giant is not taking a lot of damage. The Hunter was not there. Fear No Evil is up for oath. He will jump over the wall and immediately drop it into the pit, but he goes down right away. The Fire Giant will go to the Athenian Sages 16 minutes in. They've been able to find their first major objective outside of that Gold Fury and really try and get that momentum going.
Whoever made that call for the Sages deserves a race. That is maybe one of my favorite plays we've gotten to see. Very proactive, immediately get a kill, recognizing that there are going to be people on left. If you lose the Fury, I mean, at this point it's a Primal Fury, but you recognized that you had control, you had a numbers advantage, and you had the burn potential and necessary to get it done. You had mentioned it took a little while. 16 minutes in, right? Even with the Hunter, that was going to take a little while. I think well played, though, to pick that up. You force Oath into a bad position. He has to leap forward. And at that point, even if you have your Blink available, you're hoping you're not in combat. The Fear No Evil gets thrown out. It's helpful, but not enough. The Sages, whatever they did to prepare for this game specifically, if they did it for every single one of them, they can start rivaling the Hounds every step of the way.
17 minutes in, we've got our first kind of significant lead of the game at 4,000 gold. It's been sitting around that 12 to 1,500 mark for the entirety of this game. And that's about the highest it's been able to climb. But now with Fire Giant taken, Tier 1 and Tier 2 in the solo lane, now removed, and Dishonored slowly dealing with the Trebuchet in mid, so his team can start to group up there. For the Eldritch Hounds, I mean, haven't been able to find a pick just yet. Have been kind of getting swarmed more than anything. I mean, we saw over on the left lane, there were 3 to kill Dude Man Bro. Over to the right lane, it was 3 to kill Ducky. So it feels like the Sages are just trying to play strictly the numbers advantage for this game. But how does their team fight look in the 5v5 once we start pushing towards these Phoenixes?
Yeah, that's where things get a lot more egregious, right, for both of these squads. I think anytime, and we've talked about this, but anytime you've got a mage specifically that has nice wide abilities, Agni I think can fall under that category. Because even though his dash is super narrow and Flame Wave is wide but short, you've got the Noxious Fumes, which are going to open up a very wide stun range, plus the Meteors have to be in the discussion as well. And so that really kind of keeps things cemented around, I think, Phoenix defenses. And then you've got Dude Man Bro, Fields of Love, perfect for kind of defending yourselves. You've got, admittedly, they're all around ultimates, but for the Hounds, that's going to be perfectly fine, because the Pillar of Agony, you've got the Fear No Evil, a lot. And the Shards of Ice even though that one doesn't do as much damage, all of those are going to allow them to kind of cut off any of those passageways you see the statues standing guard at, to make it just hard, especially, literally 20 minutes into the game. Trying to knock down a Phoenix with this Fire Giant would be brave for the Sages. I think this is one that has to be at Tier 2s and then fall back.
Crimson loses out a lot of health. Ducky dives in, finds 2 inside the Pillar of Agony. Only 1 locked for a moment. And the rest of them able to jump out. Some hearts drop for Dude Man Bro on the tree, and down on the ground is Short Fuse, but he gets blown up. The instant that he does land, a Fields of Love through Oath teleports in, but has to beads away from the silence. Athenian Sage is not healthy enough to stick around. Tier 2 tower successfully defended by the Hounds.
Yeah, that one's just unfortunate. When you land as the rat, not a single knockup comes down from that. Immediately, you're surrounded by 5. If you get the 2-man knockup that Short Fuse was looking for there, because there were 2 stacked on top of each other that would have been very easy with the Agni and I believe it was the Hunbats. Suddenly, that's not a bad spot to be in. You've just knocked up 2 players. Somebody like Jangaru or Renjaru is going to be able to get aggressive, deal the damage necessary, find the picks, really kind of kick down the door. And then again, it maybe doesn't result in a Phoenix. If you get 2 to 3 kills, maybe you're getting that Phoenix. But for the most part, you're just guaranteeing that tier 2, and you're feeling pretty confident about it. Instead, you miss, you're surrounded by 5, you get burned in the blink of an eye, and there's nothing your team can do about that. They step forward, and I admire the Sages to try and save and help out Short Fuse. But with the tier 2 there, and what was an immediate numbers disadvantage, they just end up taking a lot of poke in the process. And so the Fire Giant, maybe not completely wasted, but not utilized to its maximum potential since they weren't able to knock down all the towers. Granted, it's still a 16-minute Fire Giant, which at that point is leaning a little heavier, although I'm pretty sure, if I'm doing the quick math, they're actually worse off now than they were when they had started it. And so, yeah, that is something that I think it really kind of goes to showcase that sometimes getting the FG isn't always the end-all, be-all. You lose something big, especially the bounties that this team had, right? When you're 2-1, you've been doing pretty well. Nobody on your team has died yet. The Hounds get their first kill, plus it's a good defense, plus they got that primal. Now it feels like it's become a lot more muddy in the water for the Sages, despite a really good start. And again, when it comes to team fights, with all those ultimates available for the Hounds, I think that if you're the Sages, you have to execute precisely what you intend, and a small miss, even on an ultimate, is going to just absolutely disrupt your team.
Oath chunked out. Dueling Dragons doesn't find anything. Fear no evil. Short Fuse found his way to the backline yet again, but he is CC chained to his literal death at that point, and Ducky getting some good damage against Priv. Silence will stop the dash and throw him right into the Fire Giant that's been now pulled for this fight. 2-for-none trade. Eldritch Hounds have the man advantage, but with Dude Man and Ducky both so low, even Oath taking quite a bit of HP in loss in that fight, they're not going to be able to go for the Fire Giant just yet.
Honestly, that's just a good play from the Hounds. I think the Sages try to get a fight going because they know Fire Giant's going to spawn. They want to have the advantage. But again, you end up in this bad spot where Short Fuse goes in, is pretty much isolated, and not through any fault of their own. Quig isolates them, right? The entire team makes sure that they're not only CC'd to death, as you had highlighted, but that nobody else is going to be able to get there for them. And so now you're locked away, you're dead. Priv just gets killed on the retreat from the Sages. You've got a numbers advantage for a 3v5. You might make it even more. But the Hounds, I love seeing the pressure they have on the map because they recognize not only do they have the numbers advantage, but they have complete control over the FG pit.
Bead's gone from Dishonored. CC'd, has to use ultimate, and then a jump on out. Wall doesn't quite catch Dishonored. Instead, it's Ducky who runs face first into it. He'll be dropped away. Pyromancer now grabbed by the Eldritch Hounds in the lead. Then the Athenian Sages have spent all game building up. It's gone entirely. Not even talking about the spike that happened earlier where they jumped up to 4,000 or 5,000 and now that's crawled its way back. This entire game, the Athenian Sages have had the lead. First Blood went to them very early on. They've been able to keep that lead going. And the Eldritch Hounds, in just one good defense on the left side and one good team fight on Fire Giant, have mitigated that to nothing.
It's when you get these early kills, what can you do with it, right? When it's pre-5 minutes, pre-7 minutes, really, then it's not Gold Fury talk. You have to go for jungle invades. When it's post-7 minutes, you got to start talking about Gold Fury. Post-10, you got to start talking about Pyro.
Quig almost down, but not quite. Still standing inside the Dharmic Pillar. A jump in makes it a double kill for
There we
Oath,
go.
But it's a 2-for-2 trade. The dual lane of the Hounds is gone. Jangar and Primitive both dead. Dishonored trying to bully back, but the stun is off the mark. Dashed by a Crimson Good. Ducky finds a decent bit of damage up against Dishonored. Goes in for Renjaru, gets rooted instantly through. Overhead smash good onto Dishonored. But again, the stun just off the mark by this Agni. Renjaru is fighting for his life. And with the help of Dishonored, we'll be able to get that kill. Now it's just Oath stunned off the jump. Dishonored going in. The Ren needs a couple of shots. Good stun by Crimson. May just be enough to save his life. No, it's not. Dishonored finds the double kill. Only Crimson left alive.
I mean, that's good play from Short Fuse, Dishonored, and admittedly Renjaro in there as well, right? Getting aggressive when they do. But Short Fuse is on the top of that list, not because of the 2 kills at the end, but because of the 2 kills at the beginning, right? It is a good engage, good knock-up. The first one we've seen. Out of the last 3 ults, that's the only one that is connected, and that's the one that makes the biggest deal for him, right? Go back to that left side Phoenix, or left side tier 2, ults in, misses, dies. Right side under the Fire Giant, ults in, misses, dies. This time, ults in, hits 2, kills 2, sets his team up to at least balance it out. I mean, worst case, at that point, you're going even.
Crimson, pushed by the barrier, will dash through. Decent damage onto the Sage, but even better damage towards Dude Man. The Aegis is gone, the bead's still down, the Dragon's off the mark. And the Phoenix Fire will hit Crimson. Stun in return does not find anybody. Fire Giant picked back up by the Sages. Quig walking in as the one-man army to try and slow this one down, but the Sages get the Fire Giant, and they might be able to grab one more. No, a good heart bomb by Dude Man Bro will stun 2, stop the fight, but all 5 of the Sages have fire.
Look, that's a big win for him at this point, right? Being able to take an advantage in a game where you were losing your advantage, right? And I think being able to pull it back, win a massive fight prior to the fire, get the fire itself, and be able to walk away. You had relic timers playing against you for the most part, right? A couple of beads that were up on the other side, mainly for Oath and Ducky, that maybe could have caused some trouble for the Sages. And instead, your relics are going to be coming back up. Most of the safety relics for Jangaru, Short Fuse going to be available about a minute, a little under, for Renjaro to maybe feel as confident. You are going to have to make some sacrifices, right? You just lose the Fury, which I think is merit of the Hounds being fully grouped up. And honestly, playing proactively on the map, that's a good call from them to not just back away because they lost fire. But now, it's way easier to knock down these tier 2s than it was when you were trying to do it at 17 minutes. That 10-minute gap or 9-minute gap that has happened since then, really going to elevate the Sages. And we are in Phoenix discussion territory, right? It's still difficult when it's not enhanced. And so something that the Sages are going to have to contend with, especially with the amount of CC and specifically readily available CC that the Hounds have. Because, yeah, it's really irritating playing into all of these ultimates because they're all going to be very controlling in their own ways. But you've got pretty consistent stuns coming from Crimson and Quig and Dude Man Bro if he has his passive charged up and he hits a heart bomb. And then the fear that's going to be coming out from Ducky. A lot to control just the engages around these Phoenixes, slow people down, force them to feel awkward in the team fight, potentially even re-engage when their ultimates are available. And now with their relics also coming off cooldown, I think you have to be worried if you're the Sages. You step up to a Phoenix line, there's a chance that the Hounds are going to try to pick you apart. You stay around the tier 2. You should be able to get these, kind of extend that gold lead, manifest it into about a tier 3 over like a tier 1 or a tier 2 on the other side, and try to get something going with that. But I really like that the Hounds aren't letting them just have anything for free, because they do have the ults to work with to really change things around like that.
Turnaround kill onto Short Fuse. Fields of Love, find Priv. Dark Pillars in response. The Hounds are finding their team fight back. A dash out by Priv will be enough distance to get away from Ducky and Crimson. What started as a brawl between the two junglers quickly turns around as Ducky rotates in, finds a kill for himself, and now all of a sudden the push by the Sage is completely pushed back. They're not even able to try and go for this tier 2 in mid.
Yeah, a lot of what they need unfortunately relies on Short Fuse. I think a lot of their engage for team fights, a lot of their engage for towers, their engage for Phoenixes, anything that's going to buy them space, most of it's Short Fuse's ult, right? I mean, with no blink from Dishonored or anything like that, you're going to just be jumping in, maybe finding a bit like big, massive slow for your ult, and then there's some follow-up, but Short Fuse's ult is like guaranteed. As long as it hits, you're getting a knock-up. Feels good to follow damage up on that. And they maybe have the same kind of openers, but it's a lot more difficult, I think, to pull off as opposed to what the Hounds have.
Beads gone by Crimson. Life gone by Crimson. A small little catch out by the mid-Harpies has now put the Athenian Sages in control. 5 versus 4. Short Fuse and the rest of the squad will deal with the trebuchet that spawned in. Can now make their way up towards the mid lane, start pushing up this tier 2. We saw what Quig did last time around. Auto attacks start flying to the tower. Go ahead and do just that. Throw up a wall, delay upwards of 6 seconds of their time and just waste their efforts. To where they can't deal with that
Kill
tower.
the FG.
Now, delay once more. Oath and Short Fuse having their brawl. Oath losing out on the health department in that regard, but once again, another wall through. This time Dishonor goes in. Frozen gets the beads away. Soul Laner is fine, though. The Athenian Sages can just focus on this tier 2 tower, take the last permanent structure off the map, and now they can head back to base and regroup.
Still, I would argue successful for the Hounds and in a couple of ways. Admittedly, you're still down in gold. I think that's well played by the Sages to make sure that they're picking things up. But that's been more of a plateau since they got the Fire Giant than it has been anything else, right? Like that initial dip is that team fight they win and then followed up with the Fire Giant, and then everything after that, you get a tower, it's answered back with some kills, you get a tower, you're just kind of hovering around the right area. So I think that the Hounds still come out okay from that Fire Giant. Like you said, you've lost all your towers, all your Phoenixes are exposed. It is not it is not a comfortable position by any means. But I do think we're going to have to worry a little bit about whether or not the Sages are going to be able to keep pressure up like this. Specifically with where they're going to be going. You've got the relics off on Crimson, and so if you start a fight in the next minute while those beads are down, definitely a good position for the Sages. And something like that is exactly what you need.
Well, maybe a turnaround.
He just did it.
Jump away. For Oath gets him out of the knockup from Short Fuse's ultimate. But a one-man pick, 50 seconds till Crimson's back up.
That's beautiful.
Enhanced Fire Giant on the map.
Yeah.
Now the best steal chance that you may have had with this Agni has been pulled away. But the Athenian Sages aren't really grouped up in this zone just yet. Jangaru clearing a wave in right. 4 strong for the Eldritch Hounds. Short Fuse on his way back towards this fight, but Oath has kept himself isolated. Now it's going to be a 3v4 around Fire.
Surprised that the Sages aren't playing with the lead. I mean, you got the kill, 17 seconds. Like, you need to try and do something here. Unfortunately, it's just the big team fight ultimates on the other side that cause some trouble.
Dishonored. Stunned out of barrier. A jump in and an ultimate. Sunder just off the mark. The second one will hit this time around. But the damage towards Dude Man and Quig is not as much as the damage towards the rest of them. Ducky goes down in a 3v1, but nearly kills a couple of them, making Dishonored a quick pick for the Eldritch Hounds, a 1-for-2 trade in a battle that the Hounds were down a player.
Yeah, not only down a player, but honestly, shouldn't have really been able to stand up to. I think that the zoning kind of lacks. I mean, what do you have? You have a Nike and a Ganesh, right? Like, Ganesh is helpful, but most you're going to be able to do, depending on how you want to use it, is throw out your Dharmic Pillars, try to hope they just don't walk through it. And then Nike, we saw what happens to the Nike. You jump in, you ult, they remembered the counter, they have a Sunder, they say, cool, your shield's gone? What are you going to do now? Not much, as it turns out, for the rest of Dishonored. So at that point, you're just kind of in an, unfortunately, losing scenario. Now with the numbers advantage switch to the other side, but I would argue maybe even being worse off for the Sages. 3v4, in my mind, much more difficult than a 4v5. And so the Sages are going to just have to sit back and watch. This should be an EFG for the Hounds.
Now
it definitely will be.
Not a great one there. Teleport in, though, from Dishonored to come around the backside. Dude Man Bro low, dashes right into the fire, and he will go down. It's a double kill for Oath, though. Able to pick it up off of Short Fuse. A jump away. Crimson shows up, but Crimson nearly loses his life. Dishonored walled away, but Privative sneaking by on the Elephant, throws up the Dharmic Pillars. Can he get a kill for himself? Needs a little bit of extra damage from somebody. It will be Dishonored, who beats away from the silence. Still alive on Crimson, but not for much longer. Dishonored finds the distance, but Ducky coming back into the fight takes down Priv.
Yeah, at this point, Dishonored might not make it out. And that's... No, they should be fine, right? You're Nike, you're going to have your leap up soon. Even with 3 people chasing you, yeah, it should be enough to get you away. I'm just going to call that one what it was. That was a sloppy team fight from both sides for a very long time, right? Like, it's just like, okay, well, we're going to run in, and then we're going to hit our buttons at you, but then, like, we're going to do it incredibly separated, disjointed, not necessarily as a team, and then you're going to punish us for that, and then we're going to punish you because you're going to do the exact same thing for some reason. Like, Priv ran forward there. That was entirely tunnel vision, right? Short Fuse goes in. I think Short Fuse almost necessary to make sure that steal doesn't happen. And so that one feels like the necessary sacrifice. If you're going to stop that enhanced fire giant, someone had to die. Short Fuse was going to be the one who had to make the play. Worst or best case scenario, Short Fuse gets the EFG, steals it, and still dies, right? I don't think there's many opportunities where you're walking out of there. Otherwise, it was just a very bizarre walk forward, I'll do my thing. Okay, now I'm done. Now you do your thing, and then we'll see who's like alive at the end of it between both of these teams. And so group up. I mean, play as a unit, right? If you're going to be diving, like if Short Fuse is going in, Dishonored needs to be there to match. If Privative is going to be looking for CC, then Jangaru needs to be behind him. Brinjaru needs to be behind him to make sure that they're going to be able to get this damage. And if your carries are getting jumped on, then you gotta figure out a way to save them. I think that Quig and Ducky have been doing a really good job getting to the backline. Oath in that last fight, good job getting to the backline. With both the relics up for all of the carries, save for the Aegis. Now, 30 seconds out for Dude Man Bro. I think that the Sages, at the minimum, should feel a little safer to try and pursue a fight.
Crimson was waiting. Crimson wants this fight. He is desperate to kill Short Fuse at this point. He has been sitting around every wall and corner on his own side of the map to try and get this rat, and Short Fuse has even spotted it out himself. They don't... Oh, blink, stun, kill. Short Fuse wins the battle this time around. So another 1v1 goes the way of the Sage's jungler.
I'm going to call this what it was. That was a dumb play by Crimson and a good play by Short Fuse. That's an assassin, and you're a mage with beads and meditation. like, there's not much you're getting out of this, dude. Be at the team fight where your crew needs you.
Ducky, beads gone, channels up the ultimate, gets some good damage out there, but it's a lot of it fired right back through. 1 for 1 at the end of that one, but Doom Bro goes down to Dishonored. Ducky falls to Jangaru, jump over the wall, gets the knockup on Oath, a push against the wall, shoves him right back to the rest of his team. Good damage fight back, at least out of Oath, but doesn't end up finding the kill onto any of those three. And it's a 2 for 5 trade, a deicide onto the Eldritch Hounds. But is that enough? Sages, I imagine, can only get themselves maybe a Phoenix in this.
And that's honestly even questionable. Look, there's an Agni coming up. You have to burn this down. Backdoor protections are going to be there, but look how low Short Fuse is. I mean, all it is a dash forward and a bomb from the Agni, and that could be an easy kill. Luckily, they did have the damage necessary. I was thinking it was maybe going to take a little too long for them, especially with no Fire Giant. But they got saved by the Bell. Might even be able, honestly, beads are down for Crimson. I think you could bully this Agni again.
That's a lot of damage thrown towards the Agni. His dash is gone. Stun hits Dishonored. Jangaru throws the root. Doesn't seem like he wants any part of that fight anymore.
Now imagine that damage in the team fight where they would have needed him.
Right. That would have been pretty good.
It would have been really helpful.
Would have been really nice.
I'm just like, I think if anyone on this team is looking, like, no one, your team's not built for 1v1s. No one should be peeling off to look for a 1v1 on the left side of the jungle. If you notice Short Fuse behind you, that's fine, but you've got beads. Like in that occasion, you had beads. Like you can pre-beats the ult when you know he's about to land, and then you still have all your damage. You burn down the Ratatosker in a better scenario for you and your squad, and you get to take on the Sages. Meanwhile, what we saw was just you stood still and then you got blinked on and killed. Like, I think that there's just a lot more openings for the Hounds, and it's just been some questionable plays from them, and unfortunately, the Sages haven't been as punishing as they could. I think that getting that mid-Phoenix is a really good step in the right direction, but honestly, I think being able to burn the Hounds even harder for some of the mistakes they've made, getting this EFG would be the next big step for them. And I guess to the point where the biggest burn that you can have is literally just win the game if they end up doing something like that again.
Gore, this has been a 7-minute Fire Giant dance that we have been waiting for somebody to try and finally grab the eject, but every time it's just been breaking out into a fight. A 2 for 2 trade here. Last team fight was a 2 for 5 trade, 3 for 3s. It's all these even trade outs or low health bars. And so no objective has been able to be taken aside from that mid-Phoenix. It will respawn in a couple of minutes, but it still forces somebody's hand towards the mid lane to deal with the firemen. You don't want those pushing up into the throne room. For now, the Eldritch Hounds will settle with a Pyromancer. Will they even get that one for free? Does not seem so. Presence from Priv and Dishonored will slow that one down. we're just waiting for that breakthrough team fight, because we haven't had that breakthrough just yet. It's been these break-even kind of points.
It's going to be short fuse, I think, that can really open things up. Dishonored, again, leap forward with an ult, slows people down. Short fuse's knock-up with the right amount of follow-up will be a very easy kill. And that ult can get you pretty far. Admittedly, it's much easier to notice. It's not instantaneous, so you have to be careful with the engage.
Short fuse, though, up in the sky. Fear no evil. Finds a couple of targets in the back line. Ducky goes too far in, and Jankaru is able to find the pick. Jaru grabs Dude Man Bro, and now suddenly it's a 5 versus 3. Crimson's meditation now gone and on cooldown. Stun hits Dishonored, bomb does not. Jankaru gets the root and gets the Phoenix Fire after. Oath is gone. The mid laner for the Athenian Sages finds the 3rd pick of the team fight. And now it's only Crimson and Quig left to defend as Enhanced Fire Giant goes around the waist of all 5 of the Sages.
Yeah, that one comes down to just positioning, right? Short fuse, I have to give a lot of credit to, because even though, the ult itself didn't find as much value, Ducky and Dude Man Bro were separated from the rest of the squad.
And damage good. No, Short Fuse walked back through the fire. So Crimson finally got that kill he's been waiting oh so long to get. But at what cost? It seems it's the entire rest of the game as 4 Sages push in against a single Ymir, and 1 Icy Boy is not enough to defend the Titan. It goes down. The Sages get game number 1.
Look, that was a great start from the Sages, and then they just kind of played through with that. Admittedly, a lot of times losing their lead. I think the Hounds were never quite fully out of it. Those last few engagements, though, really, again, just feels disjointed. Somebody was separate. From the first fight around the EFG, and then suddenly in that last one, again, you see the team separate. You got 2 up here, 3 down here, with 1 person circling them, 4 people circling them. Suddenly 2 are gone, and it's a 3v5. You have not a lot of wiggle room to work with for that fight. At that point, it's really easy to kind of either lean into the fight, lean into the Fire Giant. They do both. They get both, and they get the win. So the Sages, I think they just handled the scenarios well.
Getting their good foot forward are the Athenian Sages, starting up game number 1 against the Eldritch Hounds. Can they close it out in 2? We'll find out right after this break. The Athenian Sages starting off strong with a Game 1 win over the Eldritch Hounds, puts themselves now one game closer to stopping that undefeated record of the Eldritch Hounds. Can they do it? Well, if Game 1 is the indication, there's definitely a great chance the Athenian Sages starts off pretty strong, able to get 4, I think actually end up getting 7 unanswered kills total to start the game out. Finally, we see a little bit of fight back from the Eldritch Hounds. It's around these tier 2 defenses, around some of these towers and whatnot. But one of the things that we were kind of talking about, Goran, one of the things that we noticed is a lot of these team fights were just going the way of the Sages because the Eldritch Hounds were just keeping themselves out of position more often than not, trying to take unnecessary team fights or unnecessary 1v1 kind of matchups there. And because of the just sheer man advantage at that point, so it allows the Athenian Sages to find that pick at the end of the game and win.
Yeah, honestly, I think that there are a lot of moments throughout that game that are bought by really good opportunity costs from short fuse. I think that we see, I would argue, a fantastic start, even though it didn't maybe amass like a crazy amount of gold. The Sages, like you said, kicking things off, 7 unanswered kills before one finally goes back the other way. Really good pressure around objectives, even though they end up trading, I believe, most of them with the Hounds. That small lead they had the entire time was just enough to put them over the edge. And then by the time we got to the 28-minute mark here, but more specifically that 7-minute, 8-minute Fire Giant dance, it was more about these weird choices the Hounds kept making, and unfortunately, like right here, you can see very easy separation for a lot of the squad. And things like that were really what enabled the Sages to have more control around here. They were lucky in a lot of these circumstances that they were able to pull back the kills they did, because otherwise it would have been game-ending certain scenarios. So you're really looking at some balance. But when short fuse is 7, 5, and 12, and has a part of 19 total kills, you're definitely going to have a massive impact, right? A lot of unfortunate deaths. I mean, Crimson's 2 and 7, and I can think of at least 3 of those that probably didn't need to happen. 0 and 4 for Quig. Doomman Bro was 1 and 5. Definitely a lot of opportunities that were maybe cost by the Hounds. Unfortunately, just not being able to fully fight back the way they would have wanted to, despite the fact that I think their team fight total maybe had a little more strength to it. I think the Sages get to showcase where they can pick that apart, pull it apart. And really, I'm looking towards the Ratatosker, I'm looking towards the Yu Huang, because those two really knocked it out of the park for what they were able to provide for the team.
I looked over at Dishonored's damage mitigated. 95,000 during that game. Now, I know that was like a 36-plus minute game. Actually, we're like 40 minutes by the time we started getting to the end of that one. So it's a lot of time to build that up, but 95,000 mitigated. Dishonored on the Nike. We'll see if he gets it again in game number 2. Picks and bans ready to go. And as you mentioned, a few 100%ers so far for the Sages between the Athena, the Freya. The Nike now extends an extra point or an extra win up into their column there. So I kind of jokingly was saying kind of off screen, well, man, if you just ban those 3 gods away, then you got a much better chance at winning. But for now, we'll take away at least one of the big problem children and throw a second one in there. Nike banned alongside the Ratatosker for the Hounds.
Yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised in the next one. They've definitely done a lot of Neath, but like Freya comes into that conversation as well. I think one of them's a lot easier to handle than the other, and that's the Freya, right? Like, I think that they're, I mentioned that the Sages have played Freya 4 times. They've won with Freya 4 times so far this phase. That feels like a really good kickoff for a lot of things, but Freya on her own is pretty easy to handle. It's what you have around her that can usually make her feel a lot more powerful. So if they end up going that route for the Sages, it's all going to be about team comp, all that kind of conversation. Meanwhile, for the Hounds, they limit a lot of their problems. I think last game, most of their issues were around that Ratatosker. I think he was causing more trouble for them. A god that can get active early on, has a lot of disruption in the middle of the team fight, really decent at 1v1s, especially when for some reason it's against an Agni that is caught off guard in the jungle. Like, there's, I think, a lot of moments where the Hounds just tripped up because of that pick. So I like them stifling short fuse and kind of trying to shovel him into a box.
Top 2 so far for both squads, Umoja Cupid, and now a Yu Huang added to the mix. So now that the Vulcan has been picked up on the opposite side for the Sage, it seems the Yu Huang was the next viable answer, and no surprise seeing at least what was able to be done in the mid lane there by Jangaru. No surprise to see that god kind of making his way back. Alongside the Vulcan is a Hades and a Ymir for the Athenian Sages. So triple magical to start things off. Hunter and Jungler still needed for the Sages as we start jumping in their way into the second round of bans. Hunter already picked up for the
Yeah.
Eldritch Hounds. Got to imagine maybe throw a couple of shots over into that dual lane, try and get something uncomfortable over for the Sage's Hunter.
It is always weird though, because like it's that question of like, where do you go after, like once you get rid of the AMC, the Cupid, there's only a few I feel like that lately have been like super powerful in the duo lane, and so it is like more of a preference thing. What have you seen the Sages playing? And that's where I kind of like these. I actually really like both the Ishtar and the Rom bans, because I feel like, and specifically I'm gonna have to give a shout out to Vote, because the Rom pickup for the Warriors is the one that stands out the most in my mind in the SPL, because it was one that, is it the again, maybe most prominent next pick after the Cupid? Maybe not, but I think because of the way the builds have been going, Rom feels really solid right now in a lot of like these trades, and so that's a good place to kind of, again, just get a little bit of semblance of control.
Ducky going back on a signature pick of his, the Tier, something he's been playing well since before Tier was even in the meta. I mean, we dial back to his last season in the SPL over on the Valkyries, and that was a pick that he would just go to whenever, between the Sun Wukong, the Hercules, the Tier. These were just kind of Ducky style of picks. Couple that with an Awelish means some very easy CC for the Eldritch Hounds, some very easy applications of between the Emoji and the Tier. There's Awelish to find some picks. And then a 10th pick Dodgy. This is something that in the SPL is like first pick, first ban. It gets grabbed here, very end, by the Athenian Sages. Can they close it out and find it in 2? Or the Eldritch Hounds going to claw their way back and bring it to a Game 3? Their undefeated record on the line. Can the Eldritch Hounds find it? Let's jump in to game number 2 right now and see if they can do so.
I actually have a lot of faith in this Sages draft, right? I think, like, even ignoring last game, I just like this, right? I think that Hades has been top of the meta for a long time, been picked up by a lot of the SPL teams with the right build, and that is the important caveat we saw last set. It's not always going to be like a shoe-in for a Hades. You do have to have like a very appropriate build. A few other scenarios I think that play into the role, right? Like whether or not you've got a lead, how far behind you fall in that kind of circumstance. If the Hunter and potentially the Jungler on the other side is itemized to literally just kill you, then they are going to be able to eat you alive. So I think Dishonored is going to be someone that we have to watch very carefully, because it can be both great and falter for them. But I think that you've got a Dodgy, you've got a Vulcan, you've got a Ymir. Like that mid 3v3 and in team fights feels really, really solid with the amount of CC they have, again, kind of kickoff they have for fights, damage they have. The only one that gets some question marks around it will be the Heimdall. It's a safe pick. I expect to see it do pretty fine. We've seen it come out for some of the teams, a lot in Europe in the SCC, but even in the SBL. Zatman likes to come back to this pick every now and then. Hits pretty hard. It's just going to be whether or not the build that Rinjaro ends up going to plays as well into his hand as just a Cupid is going to provide on the other side. Cupid has been a top hunter for months at this point, and so trying to deal with that is going to be the I think, biggest caveat for this left-hand lane.
We did see Quig try and go for the invade, but Privative this time actually using the Hog to make sure that it gets secured, and a dive in by Short Fuse into the mid lane.
Did he get med
Gets
again?
a first blood. For the Athenian Sages. No, it's no
That's
med
beads.
this time. It is a beads on the Yu Huang. But Crimson will still go down. Damage just a little too much early on.
There are not a lot of opportunities that you're going to be able to find that kind of damage against a Yu Huang and that easy of a kill, because from this point forward, like at level 2, once he hits level 3, you have to imagine he's going to have that dash available, right? And so suddenly it's going to be, oh, well now you've got immunity and you've got your beads, and then eventually you'll have your Aegis. Like, this is where you can get the most of your kills, a very early gank, really good pickup for the Sages, and best place to throw it, I think, onto Short Fuse, onto this Daji. This is another not only really good start for them, but in my mind, this is a great pace to be able to try and continue from game number 1. Showcase that you have this early game not only locked down, but that you're really, really making sure that the Hounds are having to think about every ounce of positioning they have. Admittedly, some of these ganks are going to get a lot harder for the Daji. Not a lot of CC immunity built in across the board for the Hounds, but enough in kind of key places that you're probably not going to get as many large powwows as you could imagine. Mid, again, at this point, that I have to imagine now that it's level 3, maybe there's still a point, depending on whether or not Crimson has leveled the dash, I guess the leap, technically, that it is. And so there's maybe a window of opportunity for you still if you're short fuse, but the minute that's online, there's just so much immunity that's going to be coming out in mid that it's going to be pretty safe. Ducky's tier, and so that one's just hard for anybody to really gank. He's got 2 movement abilities plus an ult that gets him really far away once he hits level 5. And so I think that one's going to be very difficult. And then the other side, the Emoja might actually be one of the easiest to kill. And that's still difficult because Quig has a lot of disengaged potentials. Dude Man Bro can dash away. Fields of Love can help slow down the Daji. It's definitely going to be hard to find clean ganks, but I think you're going to be able to create your own opportunities, right? If Short Fuse is active enough to force the safety down on the side of the Hounds, there will be plenty of windows for them to jump through in the event that they look for, secondary, tertiary ganks at that point.
I mean, look at the respect thrown over towards Oath on this opposite side of the board. A beads pickup by every single member of the Athenian Sages. So far, all of them still up. No real beads pressure has come through. Privative will walk himself away with a Heart Bomb. Drag it from the minion wave and make it a little bit harder to clear. Slow is good. Riptide even better from Quig. Pulls them away from the Gallarhorn, but Short Fuse on the way. Thought maybe he'd make his rotation over. Is looping back towards the dual lane. Beads are up for both. The Trickster Spirit in. Goes up onto the Palau now to try and see if he can find anything, but misses all but the last chain, and that one's going to get cleansed away by the beads. Gank does not get much, but does at least strip some safety away from the dual lane.
And the knowledge, right, that you've got their beads down means that Palau's going to come back sooner. You should be able to get aggressive there. Oath, maybe looking to get aggressive for themselves. Try to get the Hounds online earlier, and they might be able to find it.
Beads gone by Short Fuse, but the wall is there, and it's on the wrong side for him. Now we have a River's Rebuke coming out from Quig. Stun just off the mark from Short Fuse, who does manage to teleport himself away. But it's a 1-kill trade out, a return kill, I should say now, for the Eldritch Hounds.
But look at this. This is exactly what I was saying about the Sages and what they were lacking last time, although it has to go the one way. Even if it doesn't, it's pressure. They get a single kill, and they're on top of the purple buff, they're on top of the red buff. They are trying to get pressure over on the left-hand side, and it strips away experience and gold from the Sages. That's the kind of thing the Sages were missing in game number 1 to start cultivating a bigger lead. Again, before the Gold Fury becomes even feasible, that's the kind of thing you have to look for, is those small invades. Are you getting as much for it as you would if you were getting your own buffs? No. But if you take that away, they're not getting it. And that's honestly more important than you getting it. And so you open up an immediate opportunity there. You fall back, you get your own buffs, that feels great. Then you can start in the next, 10 minutes-ish, looking at these Pyromancers when it spawns in at 10 minutes, but also this Gold Fury that spawned in not too long ago. Any pressure on the duo lane, if Oath goes over there and finds a kill, has to be turned into something on that side of the map. With the Gold Fury being a little easier to kill now, I would not mind seeing a little more, again, just try to find the beads. You've already got them on Priv. Go over there, maybe make Rinjaru a little uncomfortable, make him feel unsafe. If you can kill off the Heimdall, kill off the Emir, that's an easy objective swing and an easy way to kind of, again, just put your foot in the door if you're the Hounds.
Crimson going to have to go all the way back to base now. Should have that Book of Thoth ready to go for himself in order to start getting the stacks up and match. Wall will lock out Quig, who's surrounded by 4. This Umoja should be as good as dead. Vulcan Ultimate may be a little unnecessary there, but you know what? Better safe than sorry, I guess. It's early on. How often are you really using that ultimate?
It's one of the, well, that's where my mind, it depends entirely. I was thinking, okay, well, maybe they can go for a Gold Fear. Because again, the same things I was just saying about the Hounds still applies to the Sages. Get the kill, get something with it. You have a lot of pressure, 4 people over there. If you're going to go for the Gold Fury, I think that they are in a spot where you have to be very careful, right? You do not deal a ton of damage 7 minutes in, so you have to be very, very precise with it where you're throwing things, but not having that ult ruins it.
Dueling Dragons waiting out the ultimate from Priv. Intimidation, the name of the game there, but not going to be able to find a kill just yet. The Eldritch Hounds playing patiently around there, waiting out Priv's ultimate. And you know Priv did, he's like, oh yeah, he threw out the Dragons. I'm just gonna ult. He's not going to be able to push me up. And then he looks back, he's like, oh no, the Dragon is still there. But fortunate for him, the rest of his team was able to rally around. And not much to capitalize off the ult from the mid laner Crimson.
Yeah, and admittedly, I think that's the big deal, right? Is you drop a couple of ults over on the Hounds. Priv maintains beads this time, I think is a big deal for the Sages in terms of safety. We've also seen this, and had this discussion in the Pro League, specifically Neil Ma comes to my mind, about the beads for a Ymir versus going for something else. Like in a comp like this, I'm so happy that Priv went for the beads, because otherwise we'd be very soon looking at like an 0-6 Ymir.
Vulcan ult, and a beads from Oath. That'll get him away from the Pal Lao. It's a double ult by Short Fuse and Jangaru. I almost tried to combine their two names for a moment there. But it's 2 picks for the Athenian Sages, up 2-1 to the Hounds. But gold is still in favor of the other towns, if only barely. 250 and 600 XP, not a whole lot this early on. But it's just the fight back that the Hounds have been having. Every single team fight that's been brought over to the Sages side of the map has been answered back in kind. And Crimson eats a little bit of damage there from Jangaru, but not quite enough. Sitting just outside of the range of that turret means it can be an easy clear for Crimson to get out and still maintain his beats.
This is where things can really, kind of shift up. Again, you're seeing a lot of pressure from the Hounds, I think, around the map. Manticore Spike picked up for the tier. I think that's a really good item for Ducky to have. Quig might be in trouble. And if the Sages can get something big off this kill, that's massive.
Fields of love, but there's a little too much. Unfortunately, the Riptide slams into the wall. So Privative able to get the kill onto the opposition. Enemy support goes down. It's a Gauntlet of Thieves start for Quig, which means he's just going to be getting those stacks up, waiting for that aura. Meanwhile, Mail of Renewal for Privative, much more immediate access to some of those stats. But for the time, Sage is up 3 kills. But again, just the problem that was happening in game 1 was, what are they going to get after those kills? Well, maybe it can be a Gold Fury and finally get a little spike for themselves, kind of regain the momentum. Vulcan ult there, and the Sages grab the Gold Fury.
Well played. Again, that's you have a kill. You've got to do something. They had the purple, and I was going to call it a small win for them, because at this point, small wins are genuinely a big deal. When you're this even, this close, that Gold Fury is going to be able to leverage a little more in your favor. Although, again, super early on, and more importantly for the Sages, it doesn't get them a massive lead, right? I mean, you're still ahead, so it feels solid there. But because of the way that the Hounds have been playing the map and kind of more of the macro, and specifically with some of these invades that we're even seeing right now, it's stripped away the small things that otherwise would have made this lead a little more substantial, right? 2K, 11 minutes in, that's where it was at last time, would have felt a lot better than where they're at right now, lingering just a few hundred ahead. The Pyromancer's up, so maybe if the Sages can pick that up, they will then feel a little stronger. But you had highlighted it in the build. For Privative, it's something that you can get a little more instantaneous, but with the Devo's gloves now stacked there, for Ranjaro Jangaru trying to stack a book, it's still going to take a little bit, even for Dishonored, right? Just now finishing their stacks. It feels like it was going to be a slow roll for a lot of the Sages early on. Now we're starting to enter the conversation, even with some even more stacking items getting built up. I think we're still going to be entering a conversation where the Sages can try to leverage some of their strength, even if it's not as massive as maybe it could be.
You know what I noticed, Scores? There's a distinct lack of a certain item that we kept seeing a lot for the last few weeks of play. Maybe it's from some of the nerfs that we're seeing a little bit less, but only a single Manticore spike so far this game, picked up by Ducky.
Yeah.
And also no Fey-Blessed Hoop, which is something that was so popular on the Emoja. Curious as to maybe what the choice is there is to not pick up a couple of those items. Obviously, Ducky with that Manticore means he's going to get extra damage for himself on the tier, but I mean, those Fey-Blessed Hoops were such a pivotal part of the first couple of weeks of competitive play in this phase.
I think that and we've even seen it recently on Guan Yu, right?
Yeah.
And so it's something that I think very, very much in a similar spot to you. Surprised they're not here. Maybe it's something you can slot in, and it's not like the end of the world to put later in the build, but it feels weird to put later in the build. And so we'll see where they end up going, because with Quig, especially at this point, you've got the Thebes, presumably going for a Lotus Crown to be able to have those physical procs that get thrown to your teammates while on the heal as well. So that's going to be nice. But if you go for the hoops after that, you yourself are not that tanky, even though your team is loving you. So there's definitely going to be some circumstances for Quig to maybe have to either rethink it or just forego it, right? It might be dropped to the side. Manticore Spike is another one, because like you said, it's hit a couple of nerfs. still a pretty good item in my eyes. And so, like, not surprising to see Ducky go for it. I think the problem has been that some of the other gods that are using this, and it's actually really interesting because none of them were banned here, it's because it's all around the CC, right? Tier, lots of CC, it's a very consistent CC. Doesn't happen for a lot of the others on the team for the Hounds, so maybe not too surprising. Same thing for the other side. I think like the Amir is maybe the only person in this game that I could see getting it and like it being like a decent choice. The real problem is the people who are usually rocking that aren't getting picked up in the SEC. Like even looking back, like Cabrakan, who is like one of the top picks and top bans in the SBL because of Manticore's spike, it wasn't even seen in either of these games for picks and bans. In fact, I'm thinking back to set number 1. I don't even think he was seen down there either. Like it's someone that I think that those nerfs have definitely made it so that it is something that can slot in pretty easily, and if played well, can do absolute numbers. But it is not, at least for these two teams, a necessary go-to, as maybe it once was, like you said, the beginning of the phase.
I'm even thinking of other picks like Horus kind of up there. I mean,
yeah.
when Manticore Spike finally got its nice little buff to bring it up into the meta. I remember Horus being one of the big ones. Shiva even as a god in recent after some of the change-ups to Manticore Spike and Shiva.
I'm still not sold on the Shiva yet. Sold?
Sold. Sold on the Shiva, and a kill onto Jengaru. Oath grabs that one. Dueling Dragons force the Palau out. That'll also get the Celestial Flight away from the mid laner. And now Primitive thrown against the wall. Ultimate by the jungler. Double freeze is good, but now there's just nowhere for Primitive to go. He's being shoved in the locker by the Eldritch Hounds. And then an ultimate from the Heimdall only delays the inevitable. Renjaru and 2 others go down. A 3-for-none trade.
And look, talk about great timing. They're going to be down when this Fury spawns up. I almost need to see the Hounds focus on this left side, right? It's an Oni Fury that's going to give you a lot of pressure. You've got 3 killed. Please, yes, okay, pull it. Yesterday we saw a lot of objectives not getting pulled despite things like that. And I think that that's a huge deal. Maybe not as big a deal if Ducky can get this. Oh.
There were, by the way, there were 3 spikes on the ground next to Ducky to try and pick up. He didn't grab a single one during those little pushes. But he should be fine. The Fury goes to the Eldritch Hounds. Ducky will steal an offering and almost find a kill. All that while, the Eldritch Hounds have now fought themselves back into a lead, add a tier 1 tower to the mix. And this 1k gold lead is now suddenly ballooned up to about a 1,500.
Backfire?
Crimson does not want to be the one to go down here. Vulcan Ultimate gets the Aegis, and Crimson is fine.
I mean, look, well played. I think there's a moment, even a dueling dragon, I don't know what that one's getting thrown out for. Other than maybe to push someone away in the event they tried to dive.
I think he was turned the wrong way, too. I was looking for the second
Well,
dragon.
I thought he was trying to pull someone in for a second. It feels like he was, like, he wanted to push away, but nobody was there.
Yeah, nobody popped up. But that's what I was saying, is I think he was turned the wrong direction for the pull in.
Yeah.
Because when I saw the dragon, I was like, okay, well, did the second one just miss everybody? And then I
second
saw
one
the
was behind the tier
explosion
one.
a little bit further away behind that tier 1. So for now, Eldritch Hounds, they got Fury. They're able to find a tier 1 tower, 3 kills. And the momentum shift now back up. It's only about a 700 gold lead. Tier 1 tower going down in mid is at least a good little fight back for the Sages.
That's a big deal, right? I mean, after getting a Fury like that, admittedly, you're still going to have some pressure in some of the lanes. But you have to be able to find, I think, a little bit more, again, you have to maintain these leads. The Hounds get a very solid one, and honestly, with the way that this Pyromancer looks like it's going to go, are going to be able to maintain a pretty solid one. But the Sages pulling back even small moments, right? Little fights, actual solid objectives on the map, the towers, those really can amount to a lot. And so I think it's a similar pace to what we saw in game number 1, which makes it a lot more interesting. I mean, if you had asked me, again, in phase 1, Hounds versus Sages, and you told me that it was going to do anything other than be a 2-0 for the Hounds, I would have laughed at you. But I love seeing the growth from the Sages here.
Please don't laugh at me.
And then not only that, I'll do what I want, first off. But then also, I think the Sages here showcasing a lot of growth. Unfortunate timing for this little pep talk that's regarding them, though.
Ultimate from the Vulcan. Does hit Quig, but Quig will be fine. He's got some healing and some shields. A dive away from short fuse, and unfortunate for Primitive, gets caught out around the Fury pit. And this gives the Eldritch Hounds a full grouping, minus Ducky, towards the mid lane. Ducky will instead push up the right side tier 1 tower. as mid T1 falls, and the Sages don't really have an answer to kind of defend here. They've split their attention, and nobody's really healthy enough to step up and stop this. So it's not only tier 1 in mid and right, but even a tier 2 in mid to go down to the Hounds. A massive gold swing for them.
And again, no Fire Giant. Like that's massive because you still got the biggest objective on the board available on this. I mean, that's a really good fight, really good turnaround, but then just good map play to get a lot of gold back into your pocket. If you were already starting to feel the lead slipping, now you're just playing more solid. You're going to have finishing, tier 3 items up over what you're going to see from the Sages. And specifically, we're starting to step into the Fae Blessed Hoops conversation for Quig.
Oh, hey.
We were talking about it earlier. Not quite there yet, but in that the realm and is going for it. And I think that what we're going to be seeing is a very difficult team fight. Because, again, maybe Quig will be easy to burn down, although with this kind of build, as long as the heal bounces off of you at one point, you're going to have enough prots to withstand a majority of the Sages. So unless it's just like some crazy burst that comes down and catches the Umoja off guard, we're instead going to find ourselves in a position where Quig's going to be really helpful for all of the teammates for literally every single engagement.
Dude, man, who was in a really rough 2v1 earlier. Vulcanult just off the mark. Short Fuse doesn't want to expend the pal out. He doesn't have to, but maybe he'll need to dive in. Aegis, dueling dragons, not enough to save. It's a double for Dishonored. And finally a good push back, but they lost Jengar during all that one. Ducky gets pulled into the pal Lao. And Ducky's still marching forward. 2 half HP-ish targets. Now a little bit more HP from Short Fuse after healing off that camp. And Ducky's still going. He says a wall is not enough to keep this tier away. But one little shock from the Scepter might be just enough there. Red buff successfully saved for the Athenian Sages. The Hounds still pushing up, though, even despite losing a couple players.
Honestly, that tier passive goes really, really hard in a lot of these circumstances, where that freeze probably is the end of that engagement. Admittedly, in one way, you pull the ult from Ducky. That feels like it could be a win, although it's going to be back pretty soon, and not something maybe that's as massive to the kit as some of the rest of it. So Priv goes for the freeze. Anybody else, and that's going to be the end of that fight. Ducky gets to continue pursuit. It's just so difficult from that point forward because it's like, okay, well, I can only CC you for like 1 second. Like every time we throw any hard CC at you, you're just going to shrug it off, continue getting aggressive. Not a lot that you can do to try and stop the tier here. And even if you hit him with a bunch of chain CC, it's not going to be as much of a lockdown.
Whoa.
I don't know if I like this call. Maybe in terms of a bait, though.
Ducky at the top. Quig and Crimson down low. Oh, Dishonored. Getting bursted up by the Huong down. The Dueling Dragon slams him back in. And a big play from Crimson. Oath goes in. Finds the second pick. And Ducky over the top rope will find some damage onto Jengar with the River's Rebuke out. There's nowhere for this Vulcan to go. There's nowhere for Priv to go as Ducky grabs one all by himself to the back line. A double kill for Crimson. 4 gone from the Sages off a play from the Hounds.
Now, I think I can say with a pretty solid stance here, I don't like that play anymore. I think, like, it was weird to begin with. Like, if you're going to pull the Fire Giant, the minute you see Ducky or somebody behind you, you have to turn. And you're not there to DPS the objective at that point. You're there to pull someone in and force a mistake to happen. Unfortunately for the Sages, it didn't seem like everybody was on the same page as to where they wanted to go with that. And so not only does their team fight crumble, you get a really sick play out of Crimson to help kind of alleviate the pressure that was put on them from the Agni last game. But then the chase down. You know, Short Fuse can't really get out of there, can't find the kill. Ducky goes even deeper, forces, Jengar to feel awkward. Jengar throws the ult out, and it would have landed on Ducky. And Ducky just says, oh, okay, and blinks at him and gets the kill. I mean, there were just so many moments where I think the Hounds said, we want to play aggressive. And the Sages didn't punish them for that, and they didn't get off the objective fast enough. They took a little too much damage in the process. And now they've kicked, or at least opened their door. It's not even kicked down by the Hounds. They opened it wide if you're the Sages. And with the towers they've already knocked down, the Hounds now have a better gold lead, better chance at knocking down towers, really decent chance, I think, at getting into the Phoenix line as well. I think the Vulcan is going to be nasty on defense. Hades, pretty nasty on defense. Neither of them have really caused a lot of trouble for the Hounds just yet. They've been kind of speed bumps more than anything. And so the Hounds, I think, in a good spot, especially with a tier, Blink coming back up because he's got the Relic Dagger. All it takes is Ducky going behind to the back line and forcing them forward and some CC chains. And all of a sudden, there is nowhere left that you're going to feel safe standing.
Damage from the fire already starting to show from Erupt Crimson. Not last tier 2. Last one in this lane, at least. Will go down pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Hound, as Doomman Bro on the Cupid, 4 slotted right now. And pushing up towards the left Phoenix. Oath and Ducky heading towards the middle to keep the pressure up there, and that's going to force a couple players to really need to step up to try and stop this one. Not a whole lot of protections in the build from Ducky, but certainly a lot of damage and a lot of extra tools to his name to get that out there. But Primitive has to get away from the Fields of Love. Beads gone off the Ymir. Crimson does eat some of that Vulcan ultimate. Ducky is here to shove Primitive against the wall. One more hit, and Ducky will do it. But Short Fuse able to find one of his own. Up on the Palau. Not able to grab anybody just yet. Dishonored gets the pick onto Oath. The damage from Crimson just off the mark. Quick, trying to heal him back up. A good route onto Renjar will slow things down. But Ducky still 2v1ing in the back. Splits the uprights on the ultimate, but does find the push onto Dishonored. One more hit. Just one more hit would do it. And Ducky is 2v1ing in the back line. And still going for more. There's the blink. The power cleave. Ducky still back in the back line. Manages to find a kill and can rejoin this fight to help out his team. Gets the power cleave, the double power cleave on there. And Ducky finds the double. Unfortunate.
Ducky's good, man. Like, if you're 1v2ing, you almost kill both of them. You do kill one of them, and then you rejoin your team fight in a 2v2, by the way. That's been happening the whole time. And you kill one of those as well. I mean, just well played. I think good presence from Ducky to make sure that the fight stays separated. Unfortunate for the Sages that they had such a focus in the 2v1, couldn't kill off Ducky, and then also weren't joining the other fight, right, and making it maybe a 4v3 and trying to take it as a team v team instead of, two individual skirmishes. But maybe the most unfortunate scenario for all of that is that the Hounds don't get the left side Phoenix, right? So ultimately this
really
Fire
tragic.
Giant got them a Gold Fury and a tower. It has not necessarily been super successful. They lose a couple of members in the process, so fights aren't going fully in their favor. Ducky makes sure that it definitely doesn't stay or go out of their favor. But with the relics that are down, for the time that they're down, they'll come right back around the Fire Giant respawning. So you just got to be careful with where you take fights.
Renjaru waiting for the landing. Needs a little bit more, but doesn't get the last couple of autos that maybe was necessary to kill Dudeman Bro. Dudeman Bro had no relics going into that fight either. Took that 1v1 in spades. Still comes out alive, but the Eldritch Hounds on the total, seeing about 7,000 plus gold over the Athenian Sages. And as we start kind of pushing towards this 30-minute mark, Enhanced Fire Giant still, 4 minutes out from really spawning in. But last time around, I mean, we had a near 10-minute Fire Giant dance before anything really broke out. So anything is possible. And the Eldritch Hounds with this advantage can definitely take their time.
I think the engage from the Hounds is a lot better than it was last time around, though. I think that you've got a lot of options to kick off a fight. Some of them are going to be ult-oriented, right? Crimson can just pull someone forward and start a fight, but I think a Blink Fearless that's well-timed or well-executed by Ducky is going to be able to kick things off well, and it feels like Oath just wants to fight. Unfortunately, the Blink Fearless aspect of that completely whiffs. So maybe some of those attributes for the Hounds disappearing.
Well, with that Relic Dagger, it's now only 90 seconds till Blink is back up. Fire Giant, not a single soul of the Athenian Sages here to stop this one. Fire Giant will go down. Oath just solos Short Fuse in the middle of the map. No beads available to the dodge. He just got full comboed. And now Primitive in danger. The River's Rebuke go through. Dueling Dragons will push him back in. Ducky shoves him against his own wall that he had thrown up. And 2 down now. Vulcan Ultimate not going to find anything. Oath fighting against Dishonored. But now Dishonored might need to be careful because there are 5 Eldritch Hounds pushing up right.
I mean, best statement for why that fight goes better for the Hounds than it does for the Sages. The Hounds just played better is the easy way out. But really, it's despite some of these things that are missed. I mean, you have so much utility that gets used before a fight even kicks off. And yet, look at me. I mean, look at this. Ducky separating 3 people from everybody just on his own. And that's what that fight was. You had 2 people on the Fire Giant, 2 people holding off 4, and then a 1v1 happening over in the mid lane. It just felt like the Sages didn't feel confident.
Oh, Dishonored yanked back in. Not enough healing in the world to save him from 5 Hounds. 3 of the Sages back up. Primitive here in just a moment. Titan under fire. Now it's a 4v5, but the Titan is at 25% HP. Up on the Palau is Short Fuse. Gets the beads away from Oath. Renjaru low. Vulcan Ultimate does take out Quig, but Oath finds a return kill onto Renjaru. Short Fuse goes down to Dude Man Pro, and the Titan to the Eldritch Hounds. And Goremizer, we are going to a game number 3 between the Hounds and the Sages.
Yeah, I think that one starts off well for the Sages, just the same way that game number 1 does, but unfortunately you really get to see it as the game goes on. Better control, better team fight presence, better map presence, I think, coming out from the Hounds. When they got a kill, that kill turned into something on the map, whether it was a jungle invade, whether it was a Fury, whether it was a Pyromancer, or even just looking for more kills. It ended up happening. And then eventually the gap between the 2 teams really started to kind of showcase itself, specifically Ducky. Absolute menace on the left-hand side, and then absolute menace for a defense. And there's, one Fearless in there that I remember seeing that miss that otherwise maybe would have won the game faster for them, but I think with the way things were handled, the Hounds just looked better that game.
Yeah, Eldritch Hounds able to rally together and take game number 2. Can they rally one more time and keep that undefeated streak? We'll find out in game number 3 right after this. Hello and welcome back to the North American SMITE Challenger Circuit. Game number 2 between the Hounds and the Sages. This time goes over to the Eldritch Hounds, maybe a little bit more convincingly than what we saw from game number 1 out of the Sages. Sages got the ball rolling much earlier this time around, or I can't even say much earlier, very similarly to game number 1.
Yeah.
But the pushback from the Hounds this time, Gore, came at a much earlier time frame. We were seeing objectives kind of focused a little bit earlier on. But also just the general team fight. I mean, whenever we think of dodgy compositions, we're always asking things like, man, what else can pull the beads away so this dodgy can really start to flourish with that ult? And there weren't many times I was seeing beads taken by anybody except for the dodgy on the Athenian Sages. Because of that, the Eldritch Hounds were able to kind of do what they wanted.
Yeah, they didn't really have a lot. The Ymir existed, right? So, theoretically, he could potentially have found it. But, they didn't have as many bead burners consistently outside of the dodgy. And even then, that one was only around the ult. So it was unless you're stacking up really well, it wasn't going to be happening. I don't even remember a lot of powwows that connected very heavily anyway. So it's I think a lot that folds into it itself. Then you also got plays like that. I think Crimson, by far most improved from game 1 to game 2, right? A 2-7 Agni that was just getting picked in weird scenarios and looking for weird fights, to the Yu Huang that's finding 2-man pulls in the Fire Giant pit. That just feels really, really solid as a transition. Ducky.
Ducky being Ducky.
Just existing in the game.
I didn't realize he had a scepter with him that whole time.
Not only did he have the scepter, I even like it, and again, in moments like that, he wasn't super low where he needed to be worried about it, but just juking out the backfire, dodging out a lot of damage in these moments that is allowing him to live as freely as he does. And Dishonored, admittedly, lucky to get out of that one alive. I think when you have that going on from your mid and your solo laner, Dude Man Bro was did nothing but play Cupid. There was nothing real special about this. I'm going to be real, and it's not even a slight against Dude Man Bro. He just played Cupid, and he played him really well. And I think it's just because the rest of your team was playing their picks at a very high level. When Oath is going 8-2, when this Awelish is all over the place in terms of finding kills, no one's locking him down enough. And the right-hand side of the map, I think, for the Hounds, really just made it a lot easier to deal with anybody that stood up on the other side. The Sages, decent damage coming down from a couple of them, but never really converted into good team fight. And the Hounds, meanwhile, dominated any 5-on-5 engagement with flying colors.
Yeah, definitely a big step up for Crimson in this game. Maybe not the highest GPM on the field, actually nearly 600 GPM out of Ducky in that regard, but yeah, when you go from your 2-7 meditation Agni to finishing out a 3 or 4-1 to kind of end that one out. Great play around that Fire Giant too. I mean, I keep looking back to that play kind of being the big, kind of almost the final nail in the coffin there. It's just man, the right one just saw when the Sages were kind of getting a good play going, getting that Fire Giant, and gets thwarted right away. We'll see if the Sages can reel it back in for game number 3 as we jump into the picks and bans, and we'll see if maybe they're able to get to some of those winning picks of theirs. I mean, the Nike got banned away in game number 2, so Dishonored had to switch away from there, but the Athena, the Freya were still notably kind of open during that time. The Sages didn't like to go for either of them. Instead, well, let's see what change-ups do get made. First one is no more Ducky tier. We're just going to go ahead and sweep that one away from here on.
I think it still probably could have been pushed down in the priority list. I don't know if it needed to be number 1. But it was a big problem, so I do not blame them for banning it out early. It was in the bottom 2 for the Hounds, though, in the last game. I think that there's a likelihood of, because of its performance, it jumping up into the top 3. But it definitely feels like they were punished for that pick and punished by that pick. And so maybe something they can work around and try to weave around. They do, I think for the first time this set, have the Neath open. Which would have been something. Oh, I forgot about the AMC because yesterday it was so wild in Europe. Yesterday we didn't see him once throughout the entire day, to the point where I almost literally forgot about him. Banned so far this set today. I think that's actually a phenomenal first pick.
And then a Yamoja to answer back for Quig, which is a winning factor for them in game number 2. Notably, along with the tier, Thor and Hades got banned away by the Sages. The Yu Huang, which has been a consistent winning factor in the last 2 games, whichever team has had him has been able to get themselves a win between game 1 and 2, along with Ratatoskr and Nike banned away by the Hounds. So Yamoja Cernanos, we'll see something new out of Dude Man Bro this time, unless, and I say this because we have seen it in the SPL, this Cernanos is going mid to try and match up against the AMC. very likely to see a new look out of Dude Man Bro over in the duo lane.
I honestly like the idea. I mean, at this point, you know that you're going up against AMC in mid. I like matching the double Hunter. Throw the Carnitas over there. Cupid's still available. I would have liked that way more than I like a Merlin pickup here, if I'm honest with you. I think that having the double Hunter to match what should inevitably be a double Hunter from the Sages will give you a lot more pressure. Kern mid has been very solid. Thinks he plays very similar to a mage in a lot of circumstances when it comes down to mid lane clear. And I think it just would have been blanket statement better for you. I do think that the Merlin is going to enable something a little more. Double Hunter is stronger at burning down Cthulhu, but Merlin still brings a lot of burn damage with him, so theoretically they'll be able to handle the solo laner pretty well.
Well, as the bans go through, Lancelot, which hasn't really been seeing a lot of priority by anyone anywhere. I mean, SPL, we're not seeing him quite so much anymore. SCC, we don't really see him, but Lancelot with the dodgy, that one makes sense. Two more junglers, Susano and Nemesis, also banned away by the Sages. And then that opens up a Guan Yu, which is something that we were kind of talking about last game, kind of notably absent among the SCC and notably absent just across the board. Guan Yu gets picked up, and then a Fenrir Artemis in response to the Athenian Sages. Double Hunter, and quite a hefty front line as well between the Athena, the Cthulhu, and even this potential Fenrir.
Man, this one's rough. I think looking down the line, honestly, I'm more inclinated towards the Sages draft. I think that they've got really good team fight. I think they've got Double Hunter, which always feels solid. They've got really good answers to a lot that the Hounds have been able to lock in. Fenrir can get hands-on pretty early on. So can Raven, and so there's definitely an opportunity there for them. But I think it's just because of the way that their team coalesces into some of that late game that I'm more inclinated towards them. Meanwhile, the Hounds have a butt ton of healing.
Yeah, a lot of healing for the Hounds versus a lot of shred for the Sages, which will come out on top for game number 3. Can the Eldritch Hounds maintain their undefeated streak, not only through Phase 3, but for the entirety of the season? Will the Athenian Sages be able to finally be the first team to topple that record in regular season play? It all comes down to this final game. This may have been a best of 3 up until this point, but we are now in a single game to separate these two teams from potentially, at least with the Sages, maybe even being able to jump up in towards that first, if not at least second seed, push the Eldritch Hounds down. And once again, we see Quig trying to go for this invade. Privative gets his signature Athena pick, one that's been working very well for the Sages team on the whole. Couple that one with the Artemis. I mean, that's a deadly duo lane, at least to say the least.
Something that, with the amount of lockdown they are bringing to the table, I mean, not only is it just the Athena, like the taunt is going to be really good. You mentioned like taunt into the Artemis, that's going to be really easy follow-up damage. Early on, it might not be as explosive as it will be late game. But also, eventually taunt into an AMC, which is also a taunt into a Cthulhu, which is also a taunt for a Fenrir. Like, there's a lot of setup that this Athena is going to bring. And again, it's Priv who's playing it. If it was anybody else, I'd probably be a little more down on it. I think Athena, as much, I personally, second favorite Guardian, and maybe second favorite God, at least third in the game for me is Athena. But I also recognize that she has her faults, right? Like, it's something that you can bring in. Good global presence, you can be anywhere on the map. Taunt, I love it. Fantastic ability. It's really your dash, easy to block. Not only that, but it's very audible, very easy to know when it's coming. And you have to charge it to begin with, so like on top of all of those things, it's not instant the way most others are in the game. Then shield wall, good damage. The block stacks you get from like your passive and stuff like that are very helpful. But you can also get caught in scenarios like that. Like if Quig is slightly faster to the left there, Priv just dies.
But this time around, Priv does not. Neither does Renjaru. But good pressure from Quig and Dude Man Bro in the dual lane. Got that scepter, and now can keep it up by making sure that Priv and Renjaru have to stay under that tier 1 tower for this foreseeable future at least. Ducky on this Guan Yu, immediately starting out with the earrings in that tier 1 slot, so gotta imagine Fade Blast Soups probably on the mind for this Guan as a first item pickup.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've seen immediately for almost every Guan build that I've seen over the last, 4 weeks of play. And so something that I would expect to see from Ducky. Took a little while for Quig to pick it up. Honestly, might not even need to if they're going to have the Fey Blessed over there for Ducky. And they can focus on something else.
Dash is down for Dude Man.
Nice
Double stun for Short Fuse and the Riptide to get Dude Man and Quig out. But had they gotten far enough, brutalized in by Short Fuse, a dash taunt
What a taunt!
both of them. And Primitive strikes first blood for the Sages.
I think you need a little more, though. This is a 4-man rotation. You got to get something big. And they are going to have some timers coming up for them, right? The purple buff, so the little bit of an invade. I like that play. Taunt, you've got double hunter, you've got decent early game with the Fenrir damage for sure, double stun that came out of short fuse. I mean, there's so much good there from the Sages that as long as they can keep that up, especially with some experience and gold stripped away right afterward, I think that they've done a fantastic job here, making sure they get that first blood. Again, the problem is less the first blood, less the kill, more the what can you do now, right? It's one of those things, and we kind of talked about this, and it's been this long discussion over this last like half of the year. But you get that first blood, if they're just farming on the other side and they're farming well, which the Raven has been, you actually end up a little bit behind there. Like Short Fuse gets the assists there, and was the second jungler to level 4, right? So Oath should hit level 5 first if you imagine it following the same pace. And that's kind of the reason it's such a big deal to get some pressure on the map, is because the kill itself is just not as worthwhile as maybe some of the farm that you're going to be able to get. So you need, especially when you're splitting it 4 ways, you need to be able to find something a little more massive afterward. And I think the Sages are looking for that right now.
Almost got it. I think that trap was just a little bit off the mark. By Ranjaro thought maybe that taunt would drag him a little bit further up. So the Athenian Sages do TKO Dude Man Bro, sending him back, but because of how far the waves are pushed up, don't think that Dude Man's going to miss out on too much gold or XP. Especially if his support's able to keep that one held back for him. Dishonored on the Cthulhu this time around. Tainted Steel still the call for him. But going in towards what I imagine is going to be a Pythag. This has become a popular item among the solo laners. We might get a chance to talk about that after this rotation in. Oath has come through. So we'll stop at the purple buff. He's level 5. Short Fuses just hit level 5. Will make sure to secure the purple, so the Sages do not lose out on their buff camp.
Well, at least one of them. I thought red camp was about to be in a little more trouble than it was, but it's a fallback from the Hounds. Man, I don't know. It's so hit or miss. It's so hard to judge sometimes in some of these team fights. We've seen Fenrir in the SCC and what it can do, and it's been very solid. I think Short Fuse has so far been playing a very great Fenrir. And then everything else on the team, again, save for the Athena, we've seen in like Pro League level play working so incredibly well for each other. Guan Yu was a very high priority pick, but was not winning a lot of those games. You know, the Merlin, it feels like it's just not going to be able to provide as much. Yes, there's going to be some burn. And honestly, with the way the farm's going, it's absolutely, like, menacing for what it's going to be able to provide. Crimson is 2 levels up in mid, and that is egregious at this point, right? You're an AMC if you're Jengaru. Like, you've got, in my eyes, for what you provide for your team, better team fight, you peel or, like, burn through people a little bit better, you cause your team to do more damage. You are a solid pick. But if this Merlin can outpace you to the late game, it's not going to matter too much because he's going to have better burn, more consistently applied, that is going to be a little more wider range. And they're going to be able to do this, kind of bully the AMC in mid lane. And so I'm thinking we're starting to see maybe where the dichotomy, and again, this is kind of level of play, right? Eldritch Hounds are undefeated this entire year for a very good reason. And it is because their level of play usually can exceed whether or not the picks and bans are always going their way. Sometimes, as we saw in game number 1, it's not as simple as that. But I think this is one of those moments where, in a vacuum, the AMC should do a little bit better, but the way Crimson's playing it, I think this Merlin is going to be able to flourish a lot stronger.
Invade by Oath towards the enemy blue buff. We'll grab that one with no contest whatsoever. Level 6 on the Raven. Does have that Crusher picked up, so not going to have the cooldown that Short Fuse will have as far as the team fights go, but we'll get a little bit of extra burst damage. Breaks a hive, Short Fuse on the way. And maybe a fight over these camps. Grabs the 2 smalls, jumped on immediately, overhead kick to get him out. Almost enough damage from Short Fuse, but just a hair shot. One more little auto weaved in, one extra maybe minion shot could have done the deed. But Oath is able to get himself away.
Good disengage. It's a TKO. You got to do something with it. Invades onto the back cams, invades onto the blue buff. Not able to secure that one. But I like the call from Short Fuse just to make sure that your presence is known.
Jengaru's Stinger down. Health bar down in the fire. Burning away Pritive's health bar, but Tusky is here. Will find 2, will find all 3, but it's a double kill for Dude Man Bro. Dishonored has rotated from his lane to join the fight. The Riptides are not enough. Up into the madness goes Dishonored, finds a knock-up onto Dude Man Bro, and the damage with Short Fuse coupled up. We'll be able to grab one. Now in a 3-for-2 trade out. 2 versus 2 now, as Oath grabs Short Fuse. And at the end of the day, the Eldritch Hounds at least tie up the scoreboard.
That's honestly, that was a good call from the Sages to have that rotation. Short Fuse still dying. Definitely hurts them, I think, in a very large chunk. But you lose Jangaru. You see the Hounds, as you said, tying up the scoreboard, but more importantly, being very proactive. Couple of kills thrown over to Dude Man Bro. You get one more onto Oath. Getting rid of Jangaru in certain circumstances, again, I think this AMC in the late game, double Hunter in the late games, in my mind, just blanket statement in a vacuum, better than what you're going to be getting out of Merlin plus anybody. And so it is something the Hounds are going to have to play up against, and this is the way that you need to do it. It is not a vacuum, right? You put yourselves into a position where you've got a lead, into a position where you're trying to find kills left and right, and you're going to have that amount of control.
Ducky bought just enough time for himself to get that cavalry charge online and get himself out of danger. Level and a half up over Dishonored, proxy farming and even stealing away some enemy back camps with this Guan Yu. And it just feels like Gore, every single game that we have been watching of this best of 3 so far has just been the Ducky free farm game. I mean, the first 15 or so levels of the game, we don't really see anything from Ducky. We don't really see any fights coming from Ducky or really anything on the right side of the map. It just feels like that should have been a perfect chance to punish Ducky for this aggressive play that he's been getting away with for 3 games now.
Yeah, it's just so hard to chase down a Guan Yu, though, right? Like, if that ult diamond is full, then there's no point for a gank over there. And the only reason that one ends up happening is because he's at the blue buff, right? And so you're punishing him maybe for getting super aggressive. But, like, right now is the small window of opportunity you have to try and kill him. But good prot shred that also steals prots up in a matchup versus a Guardian, like, I agree. Like, you need to punish Ducky. You need to shut him down. I just don't think they have the comp to do it. I mean, Short Fuse, a Fenrir on his own isn't going to be able to do too much. And even with Dishonored being present, you would need the Athena over there. You'd probably need a rotation from Jangaru just to make sure they could shut him down fully and guarantee the kill.
For now, Greater Scorpion by the Hounds on the top side. Greater Scorpion by the Sages at the bottom. And a 1K gold lead for the Eldritch Hounds to start things out. Ducky will work on the Totem of Ku. It's been very split amongst soul inners there. A red buff invade by Oath. Will get his ults away, but he managed to steal the buff at the exact same time. So a trade out of ults from the jungler. Short Fuses will come up just a little bit sooner by nature of that 20% CDR in his Jotuns, but it's been a slow crawl for the Eldritch Hounds to bring this lead back to themselves.
Yeah, I think that, again, they've just been playing the map a little bit better overall. And some of it is just focus from the Sages being in, I don't want to say the wrong places, but the wrong places, right? Like, again, you can't really, Ducky has his ult. There's no reason to be on the right-hand side of the map unless you're going for a blue buff invade or you're just trying to make him feel uncomfortable. Maybe a Pyromancer is something that's open, but you don't have the lead, so you don't want to look for that. I think that you could easily have, be sitting mid, left right now, try to make this Merlin uncomfortable, considering Crimson still has a 2-level lead, and that's still problematic for Jangaru. Try to get your AMC back into the game, and that should open up these objectives to be a lot better for you, because otherwise, as much as I like to say, and have been saying, that the double Hunter has better late-game burn, it's still a Merlin on the other side. Maybe it's not going to be as good as 2 Hunters, but it's still really good burn. And if you're going to let him have a 2-level lead, if it's getting, so far kind of completely unanswered by the Sages, then you're going to end up in a position like this where you're just not really finding anything.
Big dive for Dude Man Bro to the left. It's the other 4 of the Hounds. On the right side for the Pyromancer. Ragnarok does pick up Dude Man, but not quite enough damage just yet. Will get it at the tail end. That's a lot of time wasted by Dude Man Bro for the Athenian Sages. Pyromancer still goes to the Hounds. Dishonored ult down. But that was a lot of time the Sages used to spend to get that kill.
Not just time wasted, but, almost turns it around. Dude Man Bro gets at least 2 incredibly low health bars there that if allowed to live, or if he had slightly more health, probably would have turned into a kill for him, if not 2. So buys time. His team gets the Pyromancer. 1 for a Pyromancer, even though it sucks to lose your Hunter, still going to be worthwhile for the Hounds in terms of maintaining and growing a lead. And this one might be more important than any of that. The Sages don't have the numbers advantage on left enough to be able to pull a Gold Fury like it's nothing. And so the Hounds get to walk over and start that up for themselves.
Renjaru, no Tusky, Ducky fighting against 3 while the Hounds grab the Gold Fury and a pick onto Renjaru. Ducky does not have the cavalry charge. This has to be a kill on the Guan Yu, and it will be so. But again, it's one person on the Hounds distracting 3 people, while the rest of the team, the other 4 Hounds, are doing something more important elsewhere on the map.
I'm going to say that, but in different terms. It's just bad decision-making by the Sages, right? Like, that kill onto Ducky means nothing. You got a tier 1, which is nice, but they got a Pyromancer unanswered and a kill. They got a kill now over around the duo lane onto your Hunter, and they got the Gold Fury from it. And so, yes, you got a tier 1 tower, a more permanent structure, 500 gold in your favor, but that's just such a small drop in the lead that the Hounds have picked up. And you use so much to chase down so little, right? And I think that's really where my problem is it's just like 3. Like, this fight could work out a little better because there's not anything massive for the Hounds to pick up after the fact. But all of these others have been during objective fights where instead of being grouped up for an objective, Pyromancer's down. Why do we have 3 people on the right-hand side of the map at all if the Pyromancer's gone at 13 minutes and you know that it's just Ducky over here? And it just feels like really, really weird choice-making from the Sages. Very different from game number 1. Meanwhile, the Hounds are reading these scenarios beautifully. They recognize, hey, for some reason, Priv is ulting over to left. We've got a numbers advantage on right now. Let's go for the Pyro. And then, hey, for some reason, 3 people are chasing Ducky down in the right side jungle. Let's go for gold, because there's nothing they're going to be able to get out of this.
Primitive ult. Now trapped inside the River's Rebuke with 4 Hounds funneling towards him. No ult to get out, and no immunity. Erupt Crimson able to pick up his first kill of the game, 1-0-4 on the mid lane Merlin. A tier 1 tower to boot. The Eldritch Hounds have just been commanding the map better than the Sages have been able to answer back towards them. 4,000 gold 15 minutes in. The Hounds have built themselves a nice lead, and there's still plenty more that they can do with it.
This is where it gets to the awkward portion of the game, though, right? You've knocked down 2 tier 1s already, and the big neutral objectives are gone. We saw a 16-minute Fire Giant. Sages pulled that. Well, that was game 1.
Yeah, that was 2 games ago.
Yeah, absolutely wild that they did that. I don't think we're seeing another 16-minute Fire Giant. I think they're in a position, the Hounds are, that they could probably be a team to feint for one. But it just doesn't feel, 1, like it's in their playbook, but 2, like it's really going to be as worthwhile. The risk that you can associate by pulling a Fire Giant maybe too soon is going to be a lot of damage on you. Crimson has some really good burn, but it might not be that good. I think that if the Hounds go for an FG at this point, it is going to be bait the Sages in, get a big kill, then turn back onto the Fire Giant after you get that nice lead. Probably feeling the 17-minute mark, but they could start it whenever they want. The downside is going to be whether or not they can successfully bait someone in or just find someone alone.
Short fuse, no, gets pulled out of the Riptide. Oh no, and the Riptide lasted just a hair too long. The taunt actually pulls 2 right back into it. And the Eldritch Hounds will be fine off their engage. Maybe a bait around the Fire Giant. See who they can drag forward. It's Dishonored first. He's about 15% of his health from a combo from Crimson. Eats another Ice Bolt, and he's standing there going, bro, stop throwing Ice Bolts at me. That's kind of rude. Primitive dashes in, misses the taunt on the Crimson, who's able to flicker himself out. And another Riptide nearly catches another one out.
Yeah, so far, I like this from the Hounds because your team fight's been playing better. You've got an experienced lead. Like, you're not losing anything from this dance lasting a little longer. Meanwhile, the Sages are stagnating, right? Like, they need this to go well. If anything, you're getting more powerful as the Hounds because your relics are going to come back up. And you're just kind of heat checking to see what the response is going to be like. Could very easily end up being something that the Sages step forward into and could potentially win. I still like their team fight. It's just fighting at a deficit in gold and experience 17 minutes into the game to a team that has been a lot more coordinated than you. Could definitely be a lot more troublesome for them if they do make one little slip up. And so I like the call to not go in, not get overzealous and think, oh, they're on FG or they're going to do FG if we don't fall back. Let them have the Pyro, but you need to start mounting a defense sometime soon. If they get this next Fury on the side of the Hounds and it goes relatively free, we're going to be talking about the fact that you're going into a Fire Giant fight, like essentially 5,000 gold down, if not more.
Whoa.
And so instead they're going for a Hail Mary.
They did this in game 2, and it didn't go well. This time, a little bit more privy to getting away from the objective in time. Renjaru low. The dive from Oath, not enough to find the kill. Short Fuse can't find the pickup he's looking for. Ends up grabbing Quig, and the team fight is now collapsing in on top of Cthulhu. Not enough to save Renjaru. He lived for a while, but not any longer. Crimson finds one, but Jengaru turns around and picks up Crimson. Now Dudeman Bro has got a double kill of his own, and Dishonored, the last one standing, will be a triple kill for Dudeman Bro and the Eldritch Hounds. And with 4 still standing, Fire Giant to go to everybody but Crimson.
And honestly, Crimson, as much as it sucks to not get the FG, is maybe the one that on that team does the least with it. I think it's going to be great to have, specifically on Dudeman Bro here, because you've got several seconds of no response from the Sages. At minimum, you should be knocking down at least 1 tier 2. I could imagine 2 from this. That tier 1 on right kind of slows things down a little bit. I don't know if we're in Phoenix Siege territory just yet, because the respawns from the Sages will come up right around the time the Hounds are going to be able to get there. But it's not going to be enough time for them to regroup fully for at least 1, if not 2, of these tier 2s. The one on right and the one in mid should go down. So the Hounds get all of that gold. They get the fight gold. They're going to be able to back after these 2 towers, and that's going to be a massive infusion for them. And honestly, that's where the biggest deal is. I mean, we're already looking at a small lead that's separating some of these, although you can see tier 1s that are matched on the other side. Actually, a tier 3 ahead overall for Dishonored, which is very impressive considering it's 2 levels down, 3 in the jungle, 2, let's call it 1.5 in mid, and then now 4 for the carries. It's a very, very massive experience lead for the Hounds with this gold back that they're going to be able to have right here. You can imagine those tier 1s that are matched are going to become tier 3s. And honestly, with this amount of gold, maybe a tier 1 on top of it. If not, maybe some upgraded relics as we're starting to see come through. It's a very, very big win for the Hounds. And it's only going to get stronger from here, right? 2.5 minutes left on a power play where they can still siege a tower in mid. Dudeman Bro already almost level 20. At this point, with this Fire Giant, you're starting to look at the conversation of partially Phoenix Sieges, but also more realistically, getting your 2 carries to level 20, getting that massive power spike that is the starter item upgrade, and having that gold. So with a Fury, at least one of these towers, they're going to be able to find it. Left side always being a little more valuable just because of pressure that you're going to be able to have then onto that Phoenix. Mid being worthwhile just because it's already taken a little bit of damage and it's still worth the same amount of gold as any other tier 2, so you might as well grab it. Don't know if we're going to start seeing not a Fire Giant, specifically a Phoenix Siege, double Hunter with a Cthulhu and an Athena. Even though the team fights have not been going great for the Sieges, the Sieges here will definitely be troublesome for the Hounds if the Sages group up. If they stay separated the weird way that they have for some of these engagements, or they get picked apart the way that they have in some of these engagements, the Hounds will be able to knock one down, but I think they've got enough to at least hold the line here.
Short Fuse losing the boxing match against Oath. Probably really no surprise considering it's a 4-level difference between the junglers. Dishing towards mid, triple taunt from Privative, but that was only to seal his own doom as Crimson finds the kill. Oath in the back line, quarter HP on the Robin. Dudeman Bro dashes out, and now Dishonored up in the colossal form does not get enough damage out there, and in fact, it's turned right back on. It's a double kill for Crimson. It's a triple kill for Crimson as he's gotten 3 of the kills of the fight. Now rotating over towards Jingaru and Short Fuse. Crimson wants to find these kills for himself, but he doesn't have any backup from his team. Aegis to get away from the damage out of Short Fuse, but Crimson is winning this boxing match out. Call it 4 for him. Not an official quadra, won't be a penta, but it will potentially just be game number 3 as the Hounds, the rest of them are running down the Titan while the carries are dealing with Jengaru. Eldritch Hounds in 22 minutes. Can they even kill Oath in this? No. Jengaru barely lives through, but the rest of the team has taken the Titan.
And it's actually really important you mentioned, first off, the rest of the team, because roll it back to that Phoenix fight. And what you're going to see is a 4-on-3 fight. The Sages only have 3 over there. Why? Because the other 2 for whatever reason, are chasing Oath to hell through hell and half of Georgia in the jungle, right? They're running down the lane. They're very tunnel visioned in. Nobody to defend. If you are looking at Priv, I think that's a really beautiful taunt. You would call it in the team fight. But your experience level, I mean, you're talking about a level 12, level 13 Athena taunting a level 19 Kernanos on the other side. And that Kernanos just ate through the health bar there. And then all of a sudden, it's a 2v4 because your other two teammates are still over there. One starts to rotate back, the other keeps the chase going. But by the time they get there, your other frontliner's dead. And it's still, guess what, a 2v4. At that point, it's just easy pickings for the Hounds. I think that it was a couple of fights that were just very sloppily chosen from the Sages. Meanwhile, the Hounds group up, play together, look really good doing it, and they come out on top because of it.
Hey, they got the kill on Oath.
They did get that kill on Oath. At least they finally got it.
It took them...
Can you imagine how sad it would have been if Jengaru died there?
Oh, man. It took them so long to get that kill on Oath, but by God, they were able to get it. But at the end of the day, it's the Eldritch Hounds maintaining their undefeated set streak so far. 14 regular season sets played, and with only one more to go. And this might be the first time, at least in recent memory that I can think of, Gore, where a minor league team just in general has had not just, one phase undefeated. We've seen that a few times. But the fact that Hounds are about to go three phases in a row in Season 9 and not drop a single set,
that's impressive.
That's very impressive.
Honestly, like you said, as far as like minor league teams go, I think the only other team that's done something like that is Belt Slap, now the Hex Mambo.
Man.
And so like having two of them, that's impressive, right? One for each region that have been very, very powerful. I will say the Hounds have dropped, I think, more games, maybe not this phase, but this year than we've seen total out of the Mambo. But I do think that it's, let's call it experimentation, I think is the polite term to say it. Sometimes like they come in, they play something that's a little more out of the ordinary, see what they can do with it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think that's the case in game number 1 here. I mean, look at the dichotomy. First blooded in game 1 with a meditation Agni for Crimson, and then finishes this game with a triple kill. It's you had even called it out, essentially an unofficial quadra because the timer played against him there. But he kills 4 in a team fight after getting first blooded on a weird pick and specifically with a weird relic choice in game number 1. So I think that the turnaround that this team has, the capability to play Smite that this team has definitely been able to stick through. And like you said, they've got, one more week now, one more set to play. And as long as they don't lose that one, they've got a perfect record when it comes down to their regular season.
I think that's probably the most impressive thing out of all of it, is having a perfect, now again, not game record. They have dropped some games throughout their time.
Yeah.
It hasn't been 2-0s all the way through. That would have been probably the cream of the crop right there as far as it goes. But having dropped a couple of individual games, but still winning out now 14 regular season sets in a row for this team, and only making one roster change throughout the whole thing. It was Remakami for Ducky. And that was only coming into this phase now. That's the only change up in this roster that we have seen so far out of the Eldritch Hounds. So these guys are really trying to prove that they are the definitive, and so far they have proven they are the definitive #1 North American SCC squad. And I think kind of moving in towards the postseason playoffs and whatnot that we're going to see from there is really where it can get very interesting. We'll see how the SOC teams can stack up against them. We'll get to your thought in a moment, Gore.
Yeah.
We'll get to the schedule and the standings, though, right now just to see, because we are now done with our second set of the day. Eldritch Hounds find the 2-1 over the Athenian Sages. Yomi Tanuki earlier on, the 2-0 over the Anansi Weavers. Now we move into our third and final set of week number 4 of the NASCC, and our third and final set of today, Kowloon Wardens and Shibalba Storm. The Kowloon Wardens aren't quite in the position that they had been in previous phases, currently sitting 5th seed, and Shibalba Storm at that number 2 slot, 2-1 versus the 1 and 2. Potential for it to tie up right in the middle with the Athenian Sages and the Yomi Tanuki. We'd have a 4-way 2-2 split if the Kowloon Wardens are able to find some success in this match against the Storm.
Honestly, I think it goes to speak about how strong the Hounds are that they're up 4-0, right? In a region where everybody else is, a stone's throw, save for the Weavers. Sorry to you guys. Everybody else, though, is a stone's throw from each other, I think is impressive to see. Because, again, when you're looking at this Road to Worlds, you're looking at this long-form kind of conversation. Next week is the last week that these teams are going to be playing regular season. But then in December, you're going to have all 6 of these teams plus 2 SOC teams separated into groups. Those groups are going to play. Eventually, it'll go into a bracket, right? Top teams from that get to move forward into a completely separate bracket against SPL teams. They're going to be playing for Worlds and stuff. But, not only is that all extra money, but like when you're looking at this and you're seeing this amount of like close contention in North America, it's legitimately anybody's game. All of these teams have a chance to go to Worlds at some point. And so if you're looking at this next set, like a win here, specifically for the like Wardens, and a loss for the Storms would be a huge deal.
It's going to make things very interesting as far as the standings would be concerned if that is the case. But that's it for set number 2. We got our third and our last set of week number 4 coming up. That's going to happen right after this break.